Hey friends, tonight we begin with something a little quieter, time of molten metal, royal ceremonies, and courtly pageantry. We're traveling to the kingdom of Benin in the 16th century to watch artisans pour bronze by candlelight, then witness how those gleaming plaques shaped politics and prestige. Before you settle in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if you enjoyed gentle journeys through bygone eras. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always comforting to see our global bedtime circle coming together. Now dim the lights, perhaps turn on a soft fan for that steady hum, and let's drift into the shadowy workshops of Benin's royal bronze casters. The foundry fires of Benin City. You find yourself standing at the edge of a loft workshop in Benin City, just as the sun sinks and the first lamps are lit. Though the town beyond hums with chatter, here a hush prevails. Only the steady hiss of molten metal being poured into clay molds breaks the quiet. You watch the forge master, her face illuminated by glowing coaster, a crucible heavy with gleaming bronze. Over her shoulder hangs a small wooden bell at the ring of a nearby servant's signal. She lifts the ladle and lets the molten stream flow, first into a flat plaque mold, then into the textured relief of a royal scene. This workshop is one of many hidden behind the palace walls, sheltered from prying eyes. No European visitor would glimpse its inner sanctum without special permission from the Oba himself. Here, knowledge of metallurgy passes from father to son, mother to daughter, in a silent apprenticeship of years. The air smells of heated sand, sweat, and resin, ingredients for the lost wax casting that gives Benin its famed bronzes. At your feet lie broken mold fragments, discarded after a single use. Their clay veneer is scored with patterns so precise you wonder how human hands achieve such detail. Overhead, the rafters bear smoke stains and ancient palm fronds woven together to catch fragments of ash. Along one battered shelf rest half-formed heads of leopards, stylized birds, and panels showing the Oba's triumphs in battle. On the ground, a small pot simmers with palm oil dregs once used to lubricate the molds. Every tool here, small chisels, wooden mallets, metal tongs, has a story of its own. As the final bell chimes the hour of opening, servants bustle to carry finished plaques out of the workshop. These bronzes will adorn the palace walls, commemorating victories, forging alliances, and reminding courtiers of the Aba's divine right. The casters watch in silence, wiping their brows and tending embers for the next pour. But how did this art form emerge along the Benin River, centuries before European contact? And what secret ingredients in their bronze alloy gave these plaques their enduring luster? When dawn arrives over Benin City, the foundry's glow is already pulsing behind palace walls. You slip past guards whose duty is to silence curious onlookers and enter the courtyard where earthen kilns stand in neat rows. Their domed tops are crowned with straw mats to muffle noise, each hearth fed by charcoal made from Morocco and mahogany. Above them, the palace towers gleam in early light, a monument to the Oba's power. But here in the foundry courtyard, power takes a humbler form. The steady heat of combustion, the slow drip of molten bronze, the patient hands guiding a sacerdotal process. A young apprentice approaches you, his arms dusted with ochre clay. Though only 14 summers old, his gaze is keen. He has already spent 6 years learning to knead wax into filigreed patterns. He raises a small clay figure, a stylized leopard with an upturned tail, and explains in a low voice how ancestral spirits guide each casting. According to tradition, before any pour takes place, the forge master offers cola nuts and palm wine at the shrine tucked into a corner of the yard. These offerings honor Olokon, the god of the sea and patron of metals, whose blessing ensures the bronze flows smoothly. Without that ritual, the wax would crack, the mold would crumble, and the plaque would be lost. Nearby, 2 senior smiths tend the crucibles. They use long-handled tongs to swirl the molten alloy, which is composed of copper from Anaha mines and brass, recycled from trade with Portuguese merchants. The exact proportions, 20 parts copper to 8 parts tin, and a whisper of lead, are guarded secrets passed down in hushed tones. Some claim the OBA requires them to be sworn to silence by ritual oath. Others say the alloy's resilience, it simply must not be known beyond these walls, lest rival kingdoms try to replicate it. As the apprentice leads you to a newly fired mold, you notice fine cracks along its surface. A master caster kneels and applies a damp palm oil slurry into each fissure, then smooths the clay by hand. This painstaking repair can take hours, but it confirms why these workshops are hubs of relentless patience rather than hasty output. Nearby, pots of pigment brewed from local ochres sit open. Some artisans will later paint details onto the bronze, accents of red and black that bring each plaque to vivid relief. By midday, the air vibrates with the churn of pounding wooden pestles. These tools help compress molds after each pour. Apprentices coordinate the rhythm. One lifts the pestle, another counts an edo. Yet another guards the edge of the mold to prevent stray drips. Should a stray blob of bronze touch unintended clay, it must be chipped away. Laterra task, both dangerous and dull, but essential for a flawless finish. Once a plaque cools, it is carried to the polishing pavilion, a low hall whose walls are lined with leather thongs soaked in palm oil. Here, elder artisans buff the surfaces with fine sand and oyster shells, drawing out the alloy's hidden sheen. The pungent temps of metal mingles with the salty sea breeze that drifts through the open door. Finally, each plaque is laid on mats of palm fronds for inspection by the forge master's son. If he deems it worthy, the plaque is wrapped in hand-woven cloth and delivered to the palace's storeroom, ready to be mounted upon the throne room's carved pillars. In this steady flow of ritual, craft, and secrecy, generations of Benin smiths have sustained an art that few outsiders ever witness. Yet the bronze plaques themselves tell a far grander story, one of politics, diplomacy, lineage, and belief. How, then, did the manufacture of these works transform from private palace right into the public face of a kingdom respected across West Africa, and what hidden rivalries simmered just beyond the foundry yard, threatening to upend centuries of unbroken tradition? When the final layer of palm oil-soaked leather is peeled away, what remains is a bronze plaque gleaming softly in the torchlight, a frozen snapshot of power and ceremony. You carry it along the palace corridors, following the low murmur of court attendants and the rhythmic drip of water from overhead fountains. The corridor walls are carved ebony panels depicting hunting scenes and ancestral figures. Now they will be joined by your plaque, which commemorates the Oba's audience with a visiting Portuguese envoy. In a world before clocks or newspapers, these images serve as living records: who visited when, which gifts were exchanged, and how the Oba's court wished to present itself for eternity. You approach the throne room, where a dozen plaques already hang in sequence like a continuous fresco in metal. Each one links to a moment of negotiation, trade, or dynastic succession. In effect, the foundry and the smiths who worked there becomes a narrative engine, translating events into embossed lines and raised forms. When foreign envoys arrive, they glimpse these plaques and instantly read a visual history lesson. You can almost see their silent calculation if this kingdom masters the transformation of raw minerals into artful declarations. Perhaps it commands the trade routes of brass, coral, pepper, and human captives alike. Yet behind each commemorative image lie quieter human dramas. You recall the apprentice whose family had served the palace for generations. His grandfather had labored in the dark heat of the original iron forges. His father had learned the secrets of alloy proportions, and now it was his turn. If the Oba chose to dispatch him with a plaque to Oman or Venice, his reputation, that of all his kin, would rise in tandem with the kingdom's prestige. But should he err, his clan might be reassigned to less prized tasks, or even chastised in public ritual. Bronze casting, then, is not merely a technical art but a gauge of social trust. In the later 16th century, whispers reach you of troubling new visitors, Dutch merchants, then English traders eager for redwood, ivory, and metal. The OBA permits them to set up small factories beyond the city walls. Some of your fellow smiths are hired for higher wages, their skills in demand, but at the cost of palace secrecy. Rumors swirl that one skilled smith was persuaded to talk of alloy formulas over a flagon of palm wine. When his flight from the city in the dark of night ended in the farmer's swamp, no official record was made. Best to let such matters remain unspoken. Yet, in whispered circles, each smith knows that a single miscast plaque might lead to exile or loss of rank. The tension between ancient oath-bound practice and the lure of foreign coin introduces a new crack in Benin's lacquer-smooth exterior. By the early 19th century, still more forces bear down. Around you, the kingdom modernizes its defenses. Firearms from the Portuguese are pressed into palace service. The plaque workshops begin producing cannons molded in the same brass and copper blend once reserved for ceremonial plaques. Once ritual bronze becomes cannonbell metal. The same smith who once repaired a cracked leopard plaque with palm oil felled clay now fits a brass cannon with touch hole plugs. Palace ritual yields to martial necessity, and the smith's hammer clicks differently. Then comes the fateful year when British naval vessels anchor in the Benin River, demanding punitive trade concessions. You stand on the quay as emissaries carry sacks of coral beads to the Oba's palace. You know that bronze plaques commemorated peaceful visits for centuries. Now they will mark an encounter bound for catastrophe. Tension infuses the air like unseen heat from a hidden furnace. When British infantry surge into the city, your foundry is among the first sight sacked. Kilns are overturned, molds shattered, and plaques each centuries old looted as curiosities for faraway museums. What once narrated a living royal court becomes inert museum display. You flee with a handful of clan scrolls and a single roll of emergency molds, hoping some knowledge survives beyond the palace's smoldering walls. Exile is bitter. You spend years in the jungle, forging small trinkets for neighboring kingdoms, fragments of your lost tradition cast in secrecy. Each miniature plaque is both homage and mournful lament. When colonial administrators finally permit your return, the palace has been rebuilt, now under a different flag, its rituals compartmentalized by British protectorate officials. The new Oba commissions plaques again, but this time subjects them to colonial bureaucracy. stamping them with exterior catalog numbers and sealing them behind gates. The old covenant between Oba and Smith is broken. Bronze plaques become objects of study rather than instruments of royal record. In the 20th century, you witness a slow reclamation. Nigerian nationalists lobby for the return of looted bronzes. A handful of plaques are repatriated to rebuilt royal courts. Skilled artisans rediscover old molds stored in dusty vaults. Even the apprentices' clan scrolls, long presumed destroyed, resurfaced in a small museum in Lagos, yet each reclaimed plaque reminds you that history is never quite whole. Some pieces were melted down for copper wire, others lie in private collections abroad. Inaccessible. As the palace opens its doors to historians and tourists, bronze plaques regain their narrative function, but now their script has expanded. They tell not only of obas and envoys, but also of resilience amid colonial upheaval and the persistence of craft traditions. When you stand beneath the glow of electric lights, rather than torch flame inscribing new plaques to honor modern orbits, the copper alloy feels different, almost alien, cooled not by open air but by fans. Yet the ritual offerings of kola nuts and palm wine endure, an unbroken thread through time. And so, the story of Benin's bronze casting is one of continuity and rupture, artistry and adaptation. From the prayerful hush before each pour to the vibrant glow of molten metal, from palace walls to foreign museums, these artifacts carry a weight far beyond their physical mass. They embody the hopes and fears of countless smiths, the shifting tides of global trade, and the slow rebirth of a kingdom's voice. Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, imagine the soft hammering echoing through the foundry yard, the ritual smoke curling from ochre-stained shrines, and the quiet pride as a new plaque joins its ancestors on the palace's carved beams. What might the next generations inscribe in metal and clay? And when historians of the future gaze upon plaques you have yet to cast, how will they read the silent testimony of your own time? The bronze plaque ceremony at the Abbas court. You arrive at the palace gate just before the sun dips below the horizon, turning the red earth of Benin City a deeper rust. Tonight, the Oba himself will preside over the annual ceremony to consecrate the year's newly cast bronze plaques. In this gathering, the forge masters once hidden behind closed doors step into the glare of torchlight and drumbeats, their work at last made public ritual. The air is heavy with expectation, mingled with the scent of palm wine, kola nut offerings, and smoldering straw laid before the throne. Inside the courtyard, hundreds of onlookers form a rough semicircle around the raised platform where the Oba sits. His royal masked polished brass, inlaid with coral beads, catches every flicker of flame. Courtiers in resplendent cloths stand on either side, while senior smiths kneel before the platform, bearing lacquered trays of plaques wrapped in pomfron shrouds. These plaques bear new images: the year's harvest, the arrival of distant ambassadors, and scenes from the ABA's recent triumphs in forest hunts. Each tray is carried by an apprentice chosen for merit rather than birth, illustrating that even in a stratified society, craft excellence could elevate one's status only for a night. A hush falls as the Oba raises his amber-tipped ceremonial spear, signaling the master forge master to step forward. With measured steps, she approaches, her ash-streaked face illuminated by torches. The audience watches her bare feet pad across the sun-baked earth. On her shoulders rests a simple leather apron still bearing flecks of cooled bronze. At her side, two attendants hold gourds filled with consecrated palm wine and bowls of crushed kola nuts. This moment bridges two worlds, the smoky, heat-soaked workshop and the elevated space of royal authority. Silently, the master forge master places the first plaque on an iron stand before the OBA. She lifts the palm wine gourd and pours a slow stream over the bronze surface, the liquid hissing softly as it strikes metal. Then, with a swift gesture, she scatters kola nut fragments atop the plaque, their bitter aroma rising in the torchlit air. Courtiers murmur blessings in the Edo tongue, invoking Olokon and Osunobua to sanctify these new records of statecraft. The OBA nods, his mask offering no expression, yet the assembled crowd senses his approval. Next, the junior smith steps forward with a second plaque. He repeats the ritual, though his hands tremble slightly, evidence of both reverence and the weight of expectation. After each pour, palace musicians strike wooden slit drums, sending deep resonant throbs through the courtyard. Each drum beat seems to echo the casting process itself: heat, pour, cool, and emergence. The sequence plays out until all 12 new plaques stand gleaming beside the throne, their clay molds long ago discarded. With the consecration complete, the Oba gestures, and palace servants unfurl lengths of woven cloth to drape behind each plaque. These banners dyed in indigo and ochre serve to frame the metal reliefs and protect them from the elements. You notice how the textiles echo the plaque's imagery. One shows hunters pursuing forest boars, while the cloth pattern features stylized tusks and leaves. In another pairing, a scene of diplomats reclining on veranda mats is complemented by a repeating motif of carved veranda pillars. That as the ceremony draws to a close, the OBA dispenses kola nuts to the gathered artisans, to each as tokens of royal. Feveran raises a final cup of palm wine to his lips, He lifts it high, and the crowd answers with a unified sip from their own gourds. In that universal gesture, smith and courtier alike share in the kingdom's fate, bound together by metal, wood, cloth, and spirit. Yet this public display masks a quieter tension. For some smiths, the ceremony marks only the beginning of their true ordeal, whether their plaques will later adorn the walls without flaw, and whether they themselves will be remembered beyond this night. Others whisper of plaques that cracked in service, or of old molds taken for experimentation by foreign visitors, gone without permission. As the last torches gutter low, you glimpse behind the tapestry banners the glint of hidden scars on the panelstini hammer marks made in haste to cover casting blemishes. Beneath the glaze of ceremony, human labor and fragile pride still lie exposed. What rivalries, unspoken bargains, or hidden resentments simmer beneath the arbor's spectacular rituals? And how might the outer display of unity in bronze conceal fractures that only time and perhaps new generations of smiths will reveal? As dawn's pale light creeps over the palace walls, the echo of last night's drums still lingers in the courtyard's worn stones. The freshly consecrated plaques, once dazzling in torchlight, now rest beneath an open-air pavilion, their bronze reliefs muted by morning haze. You return to observe the craftsmen as they prepare these plaques for their final placement along the arbor's inner chambers. Unlike last night's spectacle, this process unfolds in quiet diligence, a series of measured steps that ensure each plaque's durability, alignment, and symbolic resonance. The master forgemaster and her senior apprentices begin by carefully removing the indigo and ochre cloth backings. These textiles, woven on palace looms by specialized guilds of women, subtly reinforce the sculpted imagery. A weaver approaches and lifts the cloth from behind one panel depicting a naval skirmish with Portuguese canoes. Delicate coral beads sewn into the textile echo the tiny inlaid coral dots on the plaque itself. The alignment is precise. When the tapestry is smoothed against the bronze, the beads and metal dots form a continuous line, as if a single artist created both materials. You watch her adjust a stray thread, her fingers nimble despite their calluses from loom work. Once textiles are set aside, carpenters arrive with lengths of polished ebony wood planks hewn from sustainably harvested trees in the ice forest. Each plank is measured to fit a specific niche in the arbor's audience hall. A carpenter's apprentice, his leather apron stained with wood resin, holds a folded strip of palm fiber cord. He wraps it around a corner of the plank and marks precise notches for iron dowels. These dowels, ranked as palace arms, will anchor the plaque frames to the chamber's carved walls. Should a dowel be misaligned by a single millimeter, the plaque will sit askew, betraying both the craftsman's skill and the kingdom's image of perfection. Nearby, metalworkers fan the embers of a small brassing hearth. They heat copper solder and apply it to the combined junction of bronze plaque, textile, and ebony frame. Against the dull gray of early morning, the molten solder glimmers like starlight. Each solder joint is inspected with the quiet scrutiny of a ritual. By palace decree, each seam must bear no visible gap larger than a folded palm's width. Too small, and the solder may crack later. Too large, and the plaque will wobble with the vibrations of passing courtiers. You glance at tiny clay shards on the ground, remnants of protective molds, placed behind the frames during welding to shield the plaque's reverse side. Even the discarded bits bear score marks from careful trimming, evidence of the smith's silent negotiation with shape and space. By midday, the ebony frames, now bronze-laden, are carried through labyrinthine corridors toward the northern throne hall. This hall, reserved for foreign delegations and high-ranking chiefs, is lit by latticed windows facing the lagoon. Through these windows, driftwood smoke from cooking fires streaks the cool breeze, dusting the plaques with a fine, gray film. As they approach the hall's polished granite thresholds, a young clerk in white cloth attends each panel. He balances a wooden rod across his shoulders. On its notches hang small ivory tally beads. Each bead corresponds to a completed step: extraction from forge, textile backing, wood framing, soldering, and final inspection. His silent accounting ensures no plaque is misplaced or overlooked among the dozens awaiting installation. The installation itself is a team affair. For stout palace guards chosen for their height and steadiness stand at the corners of each framed plaque. The guards bear nothing but the weight of honor. By palace custom, a guard who drops a plaque during installation must perform a week of service in the royal kitchens. Their gauntlet hands grip the iron dowels while a master carpenter guides each into pre-drilled mortises in the carved sandstone walls. The sound is soft but distinct, gentle metal taps as each dowel seats into its recess. After each insertion, the carpenter gently tests the plaque's horizontal alignment with a string line pinned at either end. Minor adjustments require a single tap of a mallet. Major misalignment would trigger a restart of the framing process. Once all plaques are mounted, palace heralds again form a semicircle in front of them. They lower their staff's emblems of status and bow deeply. Then, a harpist, seated on an ivory-backed chair, plucks a calming melody in the Edo scale. This final musical tribute acknowledges the artisan's contributions, linking sound, metal, and spectacle into a unified tribute to the OBA's reign. You watch the arcs of torchlight flicker across the bronzes. Even in daylight, the metal retains a soft glow, as if the kill's fire still smolders within. Yet amid this precision, subtle worries flicker in the artisan's eyes. Guild elders murmur about the Oba's plan to commission a larger, more ambitious plaque depicting his mythical descent from the creator god Osa. Crafting a depiction of a deity poses challenges greater than any historical scene. How to render divine radiance in bronze. How to satisfy ritual expectations that require the plaque to exude a kind of spiritual presence. And at what cost to the secret alloy formula? If the OBA insists on broader distribution of casting supplies to multiple foundries, you overhear an apprentice whisper older smiths warning that divided workshops could dilute quality and risk the Oba's legacy. As afternoon gives way to evening, you sense that the ceremony's outward harmony belies an undercurrent of institutional change. The Oba's ambition to immortalize his divine origin may require innovation beyond traditional casting methods, testing the artisan's mastery. Meanwhile, foreign traders press for metal exports, and palace officials eye potential customs revenues from expanded bronze production. What happens when the ancient covenant between Oba and Smith must bend to new political and economic pressures? And how will the ritual integrity of these ceremonies endure when new plaques celebrate a divine myth rather than a documented event? As dusk settles once more over Benin City, the northern throne hall glows with torchlight and the soft hum of evening chants. The 12 plaques you helped install earlier now stand sentinel along the carved walls, each one a testament to the kingdom's storied past and the smith's unwavering skill. Yet tonight's ritual is not simply the culmination of last year's commissions, it is the unveiling of the Oba's newest vision, a grand plaque depicting his divine descent from Osanobua, the creator god. This image will transform the bronze narrative from earthly events into sacred myth, reshaping the symbolic language of the court. You watch from the courtyard as the Oba's procession advances. He rides atop a leopard-patterned palanquin, borne by 4 stout chiefs whose heavy footsteps echo across the plaza. Behind him, the master forgemaster leads a column of apprentices carrying the final plaque, wrapped in cloth dyed deep crimson from crushed annatto seeds. The air is thick with incense, smoke frankincense imported through coastal trade routes mingling with the scent of freshly turned earth in the palace gardens. Women in embroidered wrappers sing in low voices, while drummers strike deep rhythms on warped wooden logs. Even Benin's usual evening breeze seems to pause in deference. When the procession reaches the throne hall's threshold, courtiers fall silent. The OBA disembarks and approaches the central wall, where a wide alcove awaits the new plaque. A hush deepens as the crimson cloth is drawn aside. Beneath it gleams a massive panel at its apex. Osanobwa's stylized figure floats amid swirling cloud motifs. Below, a youthful Oba descends on a cascade of carved waves, his hands outstretched to accept divine favor. Surrounding them are smaller reliefs of ancestral rulers, depicted seated on thrones of coral and ivory. The composition is grander than anything you have seen, a tapestry of divine and dynastic imagery cast in cool bronze. The master forgemaster steps forward, her palms raised in an ancient gesture of invocation. In a single fluid motion, she pours a libation of sacred palm wine down the plaque's central wave motif. The liquid hisses, catching torchlight like liquid gold. Then she scatters kola nuts in a circular pattern around the god and king figures, each nut symbolizing a century of rule. Courtiers then murmur blessings in circles, walking clockwise around the plaque, 7 times a ritual number, denoting completeness and cosmic harmony. You feel the weight of transformation in the ceremony. The bronze that once recorded human affairs now conjures divine narrative. Palace scribes gaze up at the relief, their quill pens idle for once, as if uncertain how to capture myth in ink. Even the palace weavers who designed the backcloth stand silent, their fingers stained with the last red dye, suddenly aware that their art now frames a god's visage. Yet beneath this awe lies a subtle disquiet. When you glance at the Oba's face visible behind his coral-inlaid mask, you glimpse a shadow of concern. He offers no praise of the forgemaster in his subsequent address. Instead, he outlines new taxes on brass exports and announces plans to license casting privileges to provincial chieftains. These words fall heavy upon the smiths assembled in the courtyard. Some exchange furtive glances, recalling elder warnings that spreading the secret alloy formula would erode quality and betray palace trust. Others, tempted by the promise of greater profits and recognition outside the capital, bow deeply, hiding their conflicted expressions. After the address, the Oba departs amid the glow of torches and the toll of brass bells. The courtyard remains alive with whispered debate. A senior forgemaster gathers her apprentices and speaks in measured tones. New provincial foundries must adhere to palace standards, she reminds them, or face ritual censure. Another elder smith counters he has heard of substandard imports that crack during humid rains, an embarrassment to the OBA and a danger to those who lean upon the plaques. Such disagreements rarely surface in public, but tonight the tension is palpable. In the days that follow, you visit the provincial capital at Udo, where the first licensed foundry hums with activity. Its workshop lacks subtleties you observed. In the palace yard, molds are simpler, solder joints cruder, and the alloy shines a duller green. Courtiers there scoff at misplaced welded seams, but the Oba's new inspectors have yet to arrive. When they do, you imagine the harsh quiet of their judgments, once esteemed craftsmen humbled before the throne. Back in Benin City, the palace's mythic plaque remains the centerpiece of court rituals for months. Foreign envoys comment on its grand scale. Portuguese and Dutch traders commission replicas. The Oba's divine lineage is thus broadcast not only to his subjects but across the seas. Yet you recall the apprentice's whispered concern that such expansive licensing risked diluting the kingdom's trademark excellence. At night, you dream of the forge's steady glow, its crucibles brimming with molten bronze, and wonder whether your art, once bound by ritual oath, can survive the pressures of commerce and political expediency. Tonight, as you prepare for your own libation beneath that mythic relief, you sense that bronze plaques have become more than silent records. They are active agents in a shifting balance of power between tradition and innovation, secrecy and openness, sacred ritual and worldly ambition. When future generations gaze upon the plaque of Ozonobua's descent, will they see a pinnacle of sacred arts or the fulcrum of a kingdom in transition? And what role will the humble smith play in choosing which future is cast in bronze? The Venetian Doge's midnight salt bargain. You find yourself at the edge of Venice's Grand Canal just as the lagoon's mist curls through narrow alleys and the first lamps flicker to life. In the year 1423, salt is Venice's life, precious than gold in the markets of Flanders and Byzantium. And tonight, the Doge himself has summoned the Council of Ten to strike a clandestine deal with Dalmatian salt producers. You slip through a hidden gate in the Doge's palace, guided by a chamberlain whose lantern casts dancing shadows on frescoed walls. The scent of damp stone and aging plaster fills your nostrils, mingled with the salt-sweet Thames of sea air drifting through open windows. Inside the Sala del Collegio, 10 painted saints gaze sternly down upon a long oak table where the Doge, clad in brocade and ermine, presides over his counselors. Oil lamps glow softly in crystal sconces, their light reflecting off carved marble columns that line the hall. The Doge's face is weary but resolute for Nice's recent losses in trade. Competition with Genoa have tightened the Republic's purse strings, and he needs this midnight salt bargain to shore up revenues for the lagoon fleet and public grain reserves. On the table rests a map of the Adriatic coast, its parchment edges curled and water-stained. At each coastal inlet, tiny wax seals mark known saltworks, Comacchio, Ravenna, and the Dalmatian lagoons near Zara. A foreign merchant, all hooded and speaking a melodic Slavic tongue, stands beside the Doge, urging larger concessions. You note how he handles the Doge's quill, poised over a vellum draft treaty. His silver signet ring catches the lamplight, as if to remind you of the wealth at stake. At the chamber's entrance, Venetian gondoliers stand at attention, their striped uniforms incongruous in this midnight conclave. These men will ferry sealed barrels of salt through narrow canals to waiting merchants, risking theft by masked brigands or interception by rival city-states. The Doge taps his ring on the table and gestures. We must secure at least 300 amphorae a month, or our bakers will grumble and citizens riot. A murmur ripples through the council. Salt shortage in Venice means not only higher bread prices but also weakened naval stores, salted fish and meat for the galleys. A councillor, a stern noble in a simple black dalmatic, leans forward. He reminds the Doge of past treaties. Genoa once promised similar shipments in exchange for Venetian naval escorts, only to renege when wars called Genoa's galleys elsewhere. The Doge nods but speaks of counter-incentives. Venetian craftsmen will ship polished bronze fittings to Dalmatia, a luxury export hitherto reserved for the Sultan's court. This exchange of bronze for salt is both pragmatic and iconographic. Venice's metalworks are as celebrated as her palaces, and each new bronze lantern or column base carries the city's reputation across the Adriatic. You glance back at the merchant, whose pale eyes reflect impatience. He clarifies his price, a 10% drop in duty on his future imports of Venetian carpentry and glass. The Doge frowns. Duties on Murano glass are a major revenue source, but he consents, calculating that expanded salt imports will more than offset reduced glass tariffs. As candles gutter, the council debates the precise schedule of shipments, the tolerances for salt purity measured through simple taste tests by appointed magistrates, and penalties for breach, which include hefty fines and confiscation of gondolas. Finally, the Doge presses the quill to parchment. Each councillor signs encircled gold leaf, their marks resembling tiny halos of authority. The merchant seals the treaty with his silver ring. The chamberlain folds the parchment, wraps it in strips of red wax, and stamps it with the Doge's double-headed eagle. The treaty is complete, Venice's fiscal lifeline secured for another year. But as the bells toll midnight, You catch a flicker of doubt across the Doge's face. He whispers to his advisors. The salt producer's loyalty is as fluid as the lagoon's tides, and the merchant's fleet of small bragotsi may disappear after one shipment, lost to storms or intercepted by pirates. Worse still, Genoese spies are rumored to have infiltrated Venetian salt depots, ready to foment rebellion among the workforce if the Dalmatian deal undercuts Genoa's own salt trade. You leave the council chamber pondering the risks behind tonight's bargain. How will Venice enforce this treaty across treacherous seas? And when the first casks arrive in the Rialto at dawn, what unexpected challenges will emerge in the complex dance of supply, loyalty, and revenue that sustains it also threatens this maritime republic? The dawn sun has barely begun to bleach the lagoon's mist when you slip aboard a slender gondola hewn from large timber, its prow carved into a fearsome lion's head, the emblem of Venice's power. Your guide, a veteran salt inspector named Marco Rizzo, steers you through labyrinthine back canals toward the Rialto wharves, where the first Dalmatian salt shipment is due. Along the way, you pass silent palaces whose foundations rest on wooden pilings driven deep into the marsh, all reminding you how Venice itself is a city built on water and entirely dependent on what that water yields. At the wharf, a flotilla of Dalmatian bragotsi flat-bottomed cargo boats lies moored. Their lateen sails hang limp in the still air, and crewmen in hooded wool cloaks unload amphorae, sealed with pitch and stamped with the merchant's personal emblem. The faint stench of cured fish mingles with the sharp odor of salt crystals, caked on wooden slats. Marco counts amphora after amphora, tallying them against the Doge's treaty list. 300 this month, or Venice's grain stores could face spoilage without adequate salt for preservation. He runs a finger through coarse grains. Any trace of mud or organic debris will render the salt unfit for consumption and subject the merchant to heavy fines. As you watch, a detachment of gondoliers in striped camicia and short cloaks arrives to transport the amphorae to the salt warehouses near San Polo. Each amphora is hoisted onto a small, two-wheeled salt cart. The cart's wooden wheels squeak on damp stones, an oral reminder of the city's constant struggle against moisture. Cart drivers pause to greet Marco, confirming he is satisfied with the cargo's purity. Once he nods, they wheel their loads into the shadowy interiors of the vault-like warehouses. Inside, the darkness is thick. Rows of amphorae stretch into the gloom, lined with oiled linens to prevent chafing. A solitary lamp flickers near a stone bench, where the salt judges appointed magistrates with powdered faces prepare to taste and examine samples. They dip slender wooden spatulas into small ceramic bowls, sniff the salt's aroma, and press crystals between thumb and forefinger. Their verdicts, delivered in hushed tones of Venetian dialect, determine whether each amphora passes the test or must be returned at the merchant's expense to Dalmatia. Outside, you overhear the salt cart drivers grumble about poor wages and heavy overtime. A young gondolier named Pietro complains to his colleague, in Dalmatia, "They pay us less to haul salt through mountain passes than Venice will dole out to swamp through these canals." The older gondolier shrugs, "But here, if you drop a jar in the canal, it's your head, not your hands, that pays." Their words underscore Venice's delicate labor balance. The city relies on skilled gondoliers, salt judges, warehouse workers, and foreign producers all at once. A single breakdown in this chain pirate raid, failed quality test, or labor strike could jeopardize both bread prices and naval readiness. That evening, you attend a private meeting at the Scuola di San Giorgio degli Schiavone, the confraternity of Dalmatian expatriates. Candlelight shimmers on painted scenes of Croatian saints, and the salted cod and spiced wine flow freely. The merchant, who negotiated with the Doge, recognizable by his silken hoodies here, fending off toasts and envying stories of Venetian indulgence. You learn from a fellow confrati that rumors swirl. Some Dalmatian producers are unhappy with the brisk duty cuts on Venetian exports, for they fear glass and polished metal will undercut their local artisans. The merchant waves off these concerns, but you sense a fracture when Venetian glass mirrors and bronze candlesticks replace Dalmatian crafts. Future negotiations may yield diminished salt quotas. Later, as you walk the lantern-lit quay, you spot a skiff slipping away from the wharf under cover of night. Its pilot, a wiry figure wrapped in a heavy cloak, maneuvers past sentinel gondolas and disappears into the maze of canals. You recall the counselor's warning of Genoese spies and pirate sympathizers. If this vessel carries salted amphorae or worse, dispatches secret instructions to coastal brigands, it could spell disaster for Venice's salt lifeline. As you drift back toward the Doge's palace, the weight of the day settles in your mind. You have seen salt judged, bargained, celebrated, and possibly sabotaged. Each amphora represents not just a preservative, but a fragile link in a vast network of labor, diplomacy, and maritime power. How will Venice guard against clandestine raids or subversive plots amid its own canals? And when the council reconvenes at midnight, should the next Dalmatian shipment fall short, what new measures will the Doge impose to secure his republic's most vital resource? Edo period postman routes and delivery rituals. Section 1. You awaken Before dawn, in a modest wooden townhouse nestled between narrow lanes of Edo modern-day Tokyo, the early morning air carries the sharp scent of fishermen's lanterns, still swinging on the Sumida River and the distant rumble of clogs on cobblestone. Today, you will shadow a Haikakwa-licensed Edo postman on his rural delivery route. In an era before steam engines and express courier companies, these couriers bridged sprawling distances by foot or horseback, navigating rugged mountain passes and rice paddies to convey government proclamations, merchant invoices, and precious family letters. Outside your Haikiho, Subi adjusts the broad bamboo hat atop his shaved pate, then secures his Nagabukuro longcloth mailbag over one shoulder. He carries a lacquered wooden staff carved with a Tokugawa crest symbol granting safe passage through checkpoint towns. At his waist hangs a small scroll case sealed with red wax. Inside, official Koshu travel permits and the day's manifest listing each delivery point, from the shogun's magistrate office to humble tea vendor households. Your first stop lies to approximately 8 kilometers north, past fields already glimmering with early morning dew. As you join Subai's steady stride, you notice the precise rhythm of his geta clacking against stone. He passes a cluster of thatched farmhouses without pause. 4 letters bound for peasant families travel on strict schedules yet are not weighed down by formalities. Personal messages, wedding announcements, and rice tax notices all intermingle in his cloth bag. Along the dusty road, wooden milestones marked in black ink indicate distance and terrain. At the second milestone, a weather-beaten signboard displays the latest shogunate edict banning unauthorized river crossings after nightfall regulation. Subei obeys rigorously. Beneath the sign, a slender shrine offers a quick prayer. Subei gently pours a teacup of sake onto the stone foundation, murmuring an invocation to Inari for safe passage. This ritual, performed at every milestone shrine, illustrates how courier duty blends practical logistics with spiritual observance. By mid-morning, you arrive at the village of Kanegasaki. Subei dismounts his rented packhorse, a sturdy Kiso bred, and leads it to the local stable. There, he trades his now weary mount for a fresh one, paying the stablemaster a small fee in copper coins stamped with Edo's official mint mark. Before remounting, he unslings the lacquered mailbag and kneels to inspect its contents. Each letter is carefully reshaped, any creases smoothed, ensuring documents arrive on. A merchant's invoice is placed into a protective Fukuro paper envelope, and a samurai summons to the magistrate is wrapped in a red silk cord, marking its urgency. The stablemaster nods appreciatively, for speed and reliability have made Subai a respected name among local handlers. You notice 2 other couriers in the yard, both studying maps drawn in charcoal on folding paper. They mark routes circumventing flooded paddy fields a seasonal hazard. Subi converses with them, exchanging information about river depths and possible detours. Despite the competitive nature of delivery rights, couriers share vital intelligence. A flooded road can delay any messenger, regardless of license. By midday, the path climbs into wooded foothills. You follow Subei through a tunnel of cedar trunks, lanterns swinging from his belt to illuminate faint footprints of travelers past. Here, the whispers of mountain spirits infuse the air. Subei pauses to place a small wooden plaque on a tree trunk, signifying safe passage through these woods. He refrains from discussing personal matters, focusing instead on the meticulous maintenance of his route markers. Ahead, the road narrows as it ascends. You feel the day's heat intensify, sweat dampening the courier's blue cotton Hanton jacket. At a small way station, 2 elderly women offer mochi rice cakes and cooled barley tea in exchange for a brief service. Subai posts a notice on the station's bulletin board block, informing travelers of his next expected departure from this stop. This public posting is essential in Edo society. Villagers rely on Haikaku schedules to send their own messages onward, forming an ad hoc relay network. You notice each parcel is carefully annotated in Subai's flowing script, recipient's name, rank, and address using indigo-dipped brushes. His handwriting is crisp and uniform, reflecting years of disciplined practice. Even a small smear would tarnish his reputation as a reliable courier. As the sun dips past the mountaintop, the trees cast long shadows across your path. Subai checks the manifest again. 5 more deliveries remain for the day. Your next stop is a remote tea plantation where letters from Kyoto's tea merchants await. The plantation sits on a steep slope. You must disembark and carry the mailbag by foot, navigating narrow earthen steps carved into the hillside. Before you proceed, Sobi pauses at the plantation's gate. He bows deeply to the gateposts, wooden guardian spirits believed to protect travelers, and whispers a brief prayer. Then, you begin the ascent in silence, each footfall measured, the daytime humidity giving way to cool dusk. What trials lie ahead as you ascend those narrow steps? And can this system of shared ritual, precise handwriting, and nightly relays endure through hidden challenges, banditry, storms, or political intrigue that await beyond the next bend? You descend the steep earthen steps into the tea plantation. As dusk deepens, lantern light from the modest tea house ahead flickers like distant fireflies, guiding your path. Each step must be placed with care. The soil, recently moistened by evening mists, yields beneath the soles of your sandals, threatening a slip. Subai moves ahead with sure-footed ease, his bamboo hat casting a slender crescent of light on the wooden railing, which he grips to steady his balance. In his wake, you note the mailbag's weight filled now with invoices, personal letters, and a bundle of samurai orders shifting rhythmically against your hip. At the tea house's open-fronted veranda, you find the plantation's overseer, a lean figure dressed in patched indigo robes. He greets Subai with a deep bow, holding out a small wooden tray bearing 2 cups of steaming roast tea. The cups are carved from fragrant hinoki wood, still warm to the touch. Your journey has been long, the overseer murmurs. Please, rest before the final leg. Subai nods, removes his sandals, and sits on the edge of the veranda, sipping the tea slowly. Each mouthful is bittersweet, infused with smoky notes that clear the palate and steady the mind. You heal yourselves at a low table strewn with wooden tags inscribed in charcoal. These tags mark the destination of each parcel: Shimabara Med, Fukuoka Castle, Kyoto Merchant Guild, and so on. By morning, Subai must deliver these 2 couriers at the next relay station, some 12 ri away. The tags are critical, for they accompany the parcels across each handoff. Should a tag be lost, the entire parcel might wander the Republic's myriad roads, undelivered. As you rest, the overseer recounts rumors circulating among tea cultivators that some haikaku have begun clandestine services, overpriced nighttime deliveries of illicit love letters or secret edicts to rebel samurai. He speculates that not all licensed couriers adhere strictly to the Tokugawa's regulations, and that unsanctioned messages travel via hidden compartments in mailbags. Subai listens quietly, then adjusts his staff emblem, an outward sign of his unquestioned authority, and assures the overseer that his service remains beyond reproach. Yet you catch a flicker of concern in his eyes, managing the courier's oath. And the temptations of private profit can be precarious. The plantation's lanterns burn low as you rise. Subai secures the mailbag and straps on his sandals. You step back onto the hillside path, now illuminated by moonlight drifting through tea shrubs. The plants cast long, slender shadows, giving the scene an otherworldly quality. Ahead lies the remote relay station at Matsuo village, where couriers from the coastal roads await reinforcements. The journey will test both stamina and vigilance. The route crosses a narrow wooden bridge spanning a swift mountain stream, then climbs again through bamboo groves, known to harbor boar and thieves alike. At the foot of the bridge, you pause to offer thanks to the local river Kami, placing rice grains at a small stone shrine. Subi, as is custom, dips his hands into the stream water and sprinkles it over his face, clearing away lingering fatigue. This stream carries messages as swiftly as I, he remarks. But even the fastest current can be damned. You ponder his words as you cross. The planks are slick with moss, and each footfall creaks under load. A twin shard of moonlight glints off your mailbag's buckles, a reminder that these letters, though fragile in parchment, are heavy with expectation and consequence. Midnight deepens by the time you round the final hill and descend toward Matsuo. The village slumbers beneath rows of white Noran curtains flapping in the breeze, and only the distant bark of a village dog breaks the silence. Lanterns glow into adjoining courtyards, where couriers from overland routes have gathered to exchange parcels. Subai approaches their leader, an older postman named Tokichi, with a formal bow. Tokichi uncovers his own mailbag and, with methodical care, removes 12 parcels addressed for Edo and beyond. These he hands to Subai without word. In turn, Subai retrieves equal parcels for shipment northward. Proclamations from the magistrate, in Edo rice tax notices bound in red silk, and a confidential dispatch for the Kyoto shogunate liaison. As you sort parcels under the lantern glow, you notice subtle discrepancies. One parcel's recipient address is written in a shaky hand, unusual for a licensed hike. Tokichi glances at it, then shrugs and shoves it into Subai's stack. Small villages sometimes rely on apprentice scribes, he explains. We trust you to set it right. Subai nods, mentally noting to check the manifest. Misaddressed letters, he knows, become mortal embarrassments for postmen and may incur heavy fines from the shogunate's communications magistrate. By the time you finish, a pale hint of dawn tints the sky. Tokichi signals the village garden official who holds authority to monitor courier activities. The guard inspects both mailbags, checks, seals, and confirms permits. With his stamp of approval, a simple ink blot on each scroll case, Subai's authority to proceed is reaffirmed. The ritual, though time-consuming, ensures legitimacy. Guards take seriously the threat of rebels smuggling forbidden texts. At last, you mount darkened horses tethered in the courtyard. Subai's mount, a sure-footed Kiso mare, steps forward as if sensing the importance of this final leg. You climb into your saddle behind him, parcels secure. As you ride northward into lightning skies, you pass rice paddies reflecting rosy dawn, and hear temple gongs tolling the new day's hour. The couriers of Matsuo wave farewell, their lanterns dimming behind you. Your path leads across gravel roads toward the castle town of Takasaki, where Edo's Haikaku route reunites with coastal lines. The distance is long, but Tsubai rides steadily, sharing anecdotes of past deliveries, one where a message saved a samurai's lands, another where a misdelivered letter nearly sparked a feud between merchants. Each tale underscores the weight a single courier's accuracy carries. Yet as clouds part to reveal a faint crescent moon setting in the west, you sense the toll of continuous travel in Tsubai's posture, his shoulders slightly stooped, hand brushing the mailbag straps as though reassuring both himself and his cargo. Underneath each ritual and sealed permit lies the unspoken burden, the knowledge that a single delayed letter can change fates, that couriers travel not just for wages, but for trust entrusted by lord and commoner alike. As the road stretches ahead, you wonder, what will become of these letters when they reach Edo's central post house by nightfall? And can this system anchored in ritual, communal trust, and the endurance of flesh and wood sustain itself against the tides of change brought by new roads, forbidden texts, or even rebellion within the shogunate's ranks? By mid-morning, the sprawling wooden post house at Nihonbashi unfolds before you, a low, tiled complex of warehouses, offices, and courtyards bisected by narrow canals threaded with small barges. Here, thousands of letters and parcels converge from all corners of Japan, mountain routes, coastal paths, and the city's own dense web of canals. The stone lions guarding the main gate seem carved from time itself, stern reminders of the shogunate's vigilance over communication. Tsubai dismounts and ushers his Kizo mare to the stables, permitting you a moment to absorb the hum of activity. Clerk attendants in indigo kimonos sort bundles on low wooden carts. Runners dash papers between offices. Lantern bearers ferry pale light into storage rooms where humidity is monitored to preserve fragile parchment. Your shared parcels, those he carried north from Edo and those received in Matsuo, now rest in a designated sorting hall. Its boards creak beneath the weight of wagons lined with rice straw bales repurposed to cushion fragile items. A chorus of soft footfalls underscores the ritual of transfer. Each parcel's red silk cord is carefully untied. The wooden destination tags inspected against the master registry scroll unrolled on a low desk. Municipal clerks dip fine brushes in ink, confirming delivery instructions in precise calligraphy. Tsubei sits beside you, guiding a novice clerk through each variation in address. Prefecture names written in archaic characters, personal seals, pressed in cinnabar paste. His steady voice quiet but firm lends authority to even the most hesitant staff member. After an hour's labor, the hall supervisors marshal the parcels onto distinct pigeonhole carts labeled Edo Castle Offices, Nagoya Magistracy Kyoto Liaison, and Osaka Merchant Guild. Each cart, its wooden slats bound in iron hoops, stands ready for the next wave of haikyoku dispatched at dusk along designated highways. But for Tsubai, today's work is nearly done. He retrieves the 12 parcels bound for Edo proper and secures them back into his lacquered mailbag. He bows to the post house master, an elderly man whose lined face seems carved of oak, then turns to you with a measured nod. Your final task together requires the utmost discretion. One of these bundles, sealed with vermilion wax and marked by a falcon's feather, contains the shogun's confidential orders to the magistrate of Kafue, advising on troop deployments in the Kai province. Though included in the manifest, its contents are known only to the highest courtiers. Tsubai produces a slender ivory bookmark etched with the shogun's chrysanthemum crest and slips it between the wax seal and document, ensuring that any illicit opening would break the crest's delicate inlay. This subtle safeguard underscores the sacred oath that haiku uphold, to bear messages unaltered, unseen until the destined moment. As afternoon wanes, you follow Tsubai outside the post house gates. The city air shimmers with heat, and merchants hawk pickled plums and rice crackers to hungry travelers. He pauses at a wooden water trough, daubed with moss, offering you a bowl of cool spring water with floating cherry blossom petals, a courtesy for those who endure the rigors of courier duty. You note how even the simplest refreshment is infused with attentiveness. The petals, plucked at dawn, remain only briefly afloat, reminding couriers to savor fleeting moments of repose. Your ride, back toward the Dorjasari, toward Edo's city center, is unhurried. Tsubai navigates wide avenues flanked by merchant shops and tea houses, weaving through fleets of palanquin bearers, ferrying samurai lords. He greets fellow couriers with respectful bows. They exchange quick updates on road conditions, promising mutual support should urgent relays arise. At a busy intersection near Koishikawa's temple precinct, a small boy steps into the road chasing a paper kite. Tsubai halts, lifts the child to safety, and retrieves the tattered kite adorned with a hand-painted crane. With gentle care, he ties the kite's string to a post, ensuring the child may reclaim his broken toy. This fleeting kindness, performed in full public view, reinforces the communal trust placed in these messengers. They are guardians not only of letters but of civic harmony. By late afternoon, the Dojogen, the Makabugyo Edo's city magistrate, awaits Tsubai in the outer hall of his official residence. Plush tatami mats cushion each step, and the magistrate's advisors, dressed in formal kamishimo, stand in silent attendance. Subi kneels before the magistrate, presenting the shogun's private orders first, then the public proclamations, and merchant invoices. Each is unsealed and read aloud in measured Japanese, ensuring no clerk misapprehends nuances. Clay tiles overhead bear carved lotus blossoms, and screens painted with ink birds frame the scene. A serene contrast to the weighty business at hand. The magistrate nods approvingly, dispatching runners to deliver each document to waiting officials. A minor error in one rice tax notice or blurred numeral leads to a brief correction by a clerk before acceptance. These small imperfections, though ordinary, remind you of the human element woven into every stage of the courier system. The shogunate tolerates no errors in sacred orders, yet in mundane notices, human fallibility persists. With duties complete, Subi bows and withdraws, motioning you to follow. Outside the residence, lanterns have been lit along the stone steps, their amber glow welcoming the evening's travelers. You ride in companionable silence back toward your lodgings, passing shrines and tea houses still alive with laughter and the aroma of grilled fish. Along the way, you recall how rituals, milestone prayers, shrine offerings, ink-checked manifests imbue this network of highways and waterways with order, ensuring that letters from common peasants to daimyo courts arrive intact. Tonight, as you drift to sleep, you ponder the delicate web that binds Edopiate Japan, the couriers who traverse mountains and marshes, the clerks whose brushes swirl ink upon parchment, the magistrates who uphold these agreements, and the unseen gods invoked at every shrine. In a land without modern communications, trust and ritual do the work of encryption and certification. Each letter's journey marked by lantern-lit paths, signed permits, and whispered prayers be more than a message. It is an act of faith and a shared social contract. When the first light of dawn beckons Subei to rise again, will these ancient rituals endure as new roads emerge, as faster couriers arrive by palanquin or coastal vessels, or even as printed gazettes begin to circulate? And amid these changes, can the human care the steady hand, the whispered prayer, the rescued kite that underpins the Haikyaku's oath survive alongside the inexorable march of progress, reflection? In Edo's world of wooden palaces and rice terraces, the courier's oath wove together faith, precision, and compassion into every mile. By safeguarding letters through prayer, permit, and thoughtful gesture, Haiku upheld a fragile network of trust that sustained both state and society. Though winds of change and new technologies would later reshape Japan's communications, the lessons of vigilance, ritual care, and human kindness remind us that the most enduring connections are those forged not by speed alone, but by shared responsibility and respect for the message and the messenger. Like Benin bronze casting and royal court rituals, you step through the great iron gate of the Benin city palace, where walls of carved mud brick rise like ancient ramparts under the tropical sun. The scent of burning palm oil mingles with the earthy aroma of clay and resin. Here in the kingdom ruled by the Oba, bronze is more than metal. It is memory, ancestry, and the lifeblood of royal ceremony. Today, you will witness the craft and ritual that fuse earth and spirit into the famed Benin bronzes, those intricate plaques and sculptures that will come to symbolize a century of West African artistry. Your guide, Ioba Yu, of the palace workshops and mother of the Oba, waits you beneath a silk canopy embroidered with leopard motifs. She wears a coral bead crown and a robe of fine cotton dyed deep indigo, its edges trimmed with ornate brass bells. Personally appointed by the OBA to oversee the bronze casters, she leads you across a courtyard paved with red laterite. At the far end, a row of low shrines dedicated to departed rulers stands before a semicircle of earthen kilns. Smoke spirals upward from each kiln's narrow chimney, where iron grates guard the glowing embers inside. Under Ioba's direction, you approach a broad, shallow pit filled with fine white sand. In its center, lay Master Castro Kotai's hands have shaped a complex clay mold representing a royal warrior in full regalia, coral necklace, feathered hat, and ceremonial sword. Intricate patterning of scarlet and black clay highlights details: the warrior's braided hair, the texture of woven cloth, and the carved insignia of the Oba's lineage at his sandals. This lost wax mold will vanish in the casting process, leaving only the bronze figure itself. Okoti scrapes fine charcoal dust across the mold's surface, his practiced fingers tracing the engraved lines to ensure every detail will survive. The molten metal, he sprinkles a mist of palm oil solution to bind the charcoal and clay before pressing a final thin layer of secondary clay. At his side stands his apprentice, Ueka Jr., who holds a copper ladle of liquid wax. Ueka carefully pours wax into the mold's deepest recesses, filling each hollow. As you watch, the wax pools then spills back into the ladle, testifying to the mold's perfect cavity. This ritual, known in the local Edo tongue as ekbuken, ensures a concise wax model that will later be encased once more in clay for the final casting nearby. 3 other apprentices prepare the crucible, a heavy iron pot hung over a roaring fire. They stoke the flames with dried palm kernels until orange tongues lick the pot's rim, heating it to a temperature enough to melt copper, tin, and lead. A small ledger held by another attendant records each alloy's precise ratio: 80 parts copper, 15 tin, 5 lead. This formula was established by 3 generations of bronze masters, each mnemonic encoded in ritual verses recited during alloy preparation. You hear a soft chant, "From earth's vein, give shape to crown, melt and bind, our king's renown." At Ioba's signal, the apprentices lift the wax-filled mold and surround it with a second layer of clay. Their hands move in unison, patting and smoothing the clay until a compact shell encases the wax model entirely. They leave small holes sprues through which the molten bronze will flow and air will escape. The shrine drums in a low rhythm, setting a measured pace to the labor. Throughout this process, no word is spoken. Benin bronze casting is both artisan work and sacred ceremony, each step imbued with reverence for the ancestors who guide the observers inside the shrine to Orba Yue, the great mythical king credited with founding many palace rituals. You glimpse a row of bronze heads, each perfectly symmetrical and softly reflective in the firelight. These are the Ifu memorial heads made to honor past rulers. Their wide almond-shaped eyes stare eternally forward, their lips curled in cryptic smiles. Pilgrims and palace attendants leave offerings of cola, nuts, and palm wine before each head, asking for guidance as the city's artisans proceed with the day's casting. As the crucible reaches its peak temperature, 2 men lift it from the kiln. With heavy iron tongs, they march in measured steps toward the clay-encased model, careful not to jostle the molten metal. The crucible's lid lifts, revealing molten bronze, swirling like liquid sunrise. A metallic hiss escapes as the glowing liquid meets cooler air. At Ioba's silent gesture, the pour begins. Bronze streams into the sprues, filling every crevice of the hidden wax form. The apprentices stand back, watching the flow until no further bronze emerges and the crucible is emptied. Then the waiting begins. The clay shell must cool slowly to solidify the bronze without cracking. For 3 days, the royal smiths cover it with damp banana leaves, stoking small fires beneath to maintain even warmth. During this period, palace etiquette forbids laughter or music near the molds, a hush enforced to show respect for the nascent spirit within the metal. On the 4th day, you return to the workshop as Ioba leads the unveiling. The outer clay shell is cracked away with wooden mallets and delicately brushed off beneath. The bronze figure emerges, its surface rough and mottled. Still warm, it gleams with promise. Apprentices use small chisels, files, and bamboo brushes to remove sprues and smooth seams. Okoti inspects each detail: the curve of the warrior's sword hilt, the expression in his eyes, the pattern of his braided hair. Any flaw, no matter how slight, must be corrected by minute chiseling before the figure is considered palace-worthy. Finally, the bronze is immersed in a bath of fermented palm oil mixed with camwood dye, producing its signature dark mahogany. Patina, the oil bath charged with perforated cola shells, imbues the metal with a gentle luster as the dye stains its surface. Ioba pronounces the patina fitting, and a chorus of palace attendants whispers "Yui Wu," an Edo exclamation of approval. The bronze is then placed on a low pedestal in the inner courtyard, where hawkish palace guards ensure only approved eyes may glimpse its newly revealed form. As twilight falls, you step away from the kilns and molds into the palace's grand hall. Coral bead curtains rustle in the breeze, and servants prepare the evening's feast of pounded yam, stewed goat, and peppered fish. Soon, the OBA will receive the new bronze warrior, placing it among the ancestral collection where it will stand for generations. Each casting ceremony both honors the king's lineage and reinforces spiritual bonds between living ruler and ancestral spirits. Yet you wonder, when the next casting cycles begin, will court integral smith families, vying for prestigious shifts in royal favor, alter these time-honored rituals? And how long can the kingdom sustain the delicate balance of artistry, spirituality, and political power that breathes life into each bronze creation? Several weeks have passed since the unveiling of the warrior plaque in the Arba's inner courtyard. You return now at midday, summoned by Ioba Uduagban to observe the next phase: consecration of the bronze sculptures through court rituals that transform raw metal into living symbols of royal authority. The palace corridors are hushed except for the soft clatter of coral bead anklets and distant chants of the Igi drummers. You enter the expansive arch and audience chamber, whose polished hardwood pillars gleam with lacquered reliefs of leopards and crocodiles motifs, reminding all who enter that the Orba rules by divine right. In the center of the hall rests a low dais draped in crimson velvet. Upon it lie the freshly completed bronze pieces, a kneeling archer, a regal head of a former Oba, and the warrior figure you witnessed cast. Surrounding the dais are 20 palace elders, each robed in indigo cloth and wearing coral necklaces. Their beaded crowns indicate their seniority. Some strands bear ivory spacers, carved with intricate animal shapes. These elders represent both the lineage of craftsmanship and the kingdom's civil administration. At the head of the dais stands Ioba Uduagban herself. Her coral crown catches stray shafts of sunlight filtering through small clerestory windows. Each pane a thick disk of translucent mud glass. Flanked by brass lanterns, she raises her hands in solemn greeting as the orb resplendent in his robe of gold-threaded silk and bedecked with coral enters the chamber and seats himself upon a carved ivory throne. The throne's backrest depicts the mythical founding of Benin City by granting an air of sacred continuity to the proceedings. A hush falls. The OBA signals Ioba to begin. She steps forward, holding a small, oblong iron bell. With each measured toll, 12 palace acolytes approach the dais carrying copper bowls filled with kola nuts, palm wine, and red ochre. These bowls, placed at each corner of the dais, form a quadripartite grid indicating the kingdoms for cardinal regents Uzulu, Idonra, Imodo, and Agega. The acolytes' boys no older than 12 kneel respectfully, eyes downcast, awaiting the next instruction. Ioba lifts a handful of crushed kola nut and sprinkles granules over the bronze pieces, murmuring an invocation by Kola's vigor. May these bronzes speak true of our ancestors' valor. She then dips a slender brush into red ochre and gently paints small dots upon each figure's eyes, mouth, and breastplates, sacred touch points believed to awaken the plaque's spiritual essence. The elders echo her chant, voices low but unwavering. Yumwan Ago, Yumwan Obaro, spirit of homeland, spirit of kingship. Next, a group of palace smiths enters, carrying a heavy brass kettle of warm palm oil scented with bitter cane. In unison, they pour a continuous stream over each bronze knot to seek patina, but to wash away residual dust and clay ash. The oil hisses softly as it meets the metal, releasing fragrant wisps that coil upward like incense. Watching closely, you notice how the oil gathers in the plaque's crevices before running off onto cloths held by attendants. This purification ritual called Uzog Begbin's earth, metal, and spirit, completing the transformation begun weeks ago in the SMITHY. Now, the hall's ambient sound is a low rumble, the echo of the bell, the hushed voices of elders, and the distant rustle of court fans. With the purification complete, Ioba claps once, signaling the arrival of the final ritual implement, the coral-gemmed scepter. A palace guard escorts the scepter topped by a carved ivory figure of a crowned leopard into the chamber. The Oba rises and gestures that Ioba presented. She accepts with both hands, laying it across her apron before raising it skyward. A beam of sunlight strikes the scepter's gems, scattering crimson reflections across the bronzes below. The OBA intones by royal mandate and ancestral favor. These bronzes bear the Oba's word. May they endure as guardians of our city. As the scepter settles back into the Oba's hands, Ioba kneels to receive his blessing. He dips his fingertip into the final copper bowl filled with sacramental palm wine and touches her forehead, lips, and brow. 3 sips later, she rises, and the court's tension breaks. A vibrant whoop rises from the assembled elders, soon echoed by palace trumpeters outside the chamber. Musicians strike gourds and wooden flutes, and the hall fills with an unexpected liveliness. The warrior plaque, now redotted in ochre and glistening with purified oil, seems to smile against the velvet clother. Sentinel awakened at the consecration complete. The OBA departs through silk-draped doors, followed by his retinue. Ioba gestures to you to approach the dais. You have seen the medal-given spirit, she says, voice soft yet firm. But this is only half the story. Soon, these bronzes will be affixed to palace walls, telling stories of lineage, myth, and rule. Only then will their full power be known. She hands you a slender ebony stylus carved with coral inlay, the tool used by court scribes to record each consecration. In the palace chronicle. Taking the stylus, you feel its weight in your hand, lighter than the bronze you cast, yet heavy with responsibility. As you lean forward to inscribe the date and names of participating smiths onto parchment, you consider how this ritual both cements the OBA's authority and binds the artisans to their rulers. Each strike of your stylus is a testament to craft, to ceremony, and to power's memory. But even as the brass bells ring and the palace air fills with triumphant drums, you wonder, how secure is this alliance between smiths and sovereign? Might factional rivalries, shifting loyalties, or foreign influences ever erode the sacred trust that animates these bronzes? And as new generations of artisans emerge, will they honor these time-honored rituals or find new ways to shape both metal and destiny? In the days following the grand consecration, the new bronzes are readied for installation upon the palace's inner walls. Wooden scaffolds rise before the mud brick facade, floorboards groaning under the weight of assembled smiths and artisans. Under a hot sun muted by woven palm mats overhead, apprentices carry trays of iron nails, small hammers, and wooden wedges. Each bronze plaque bears tiny loops on its reverse, fashioned in the mold stage. Through these loops, iron nails tempered by palace blacksmiths for just the right strengths will bind metal to masonry. That morning, you join Ioba Uduagban and Master Castor Okodi at the base of the western wall, where the kneeling archer plaque is slated to stand. She holds a length of red silk cord, marking the plaque's central axis with a gentle touch against the mudbrick. Beneath her guiding hand, Okoti's apprentices point out slight irregularities, vertical misalignments of a single millimeter that must be corrected before fastening. These minute calibrations, trivial in ordinary construction, carry immense weight here. Any unevenness would disrespect ancestral symmetry and disrupt the palace's spiritual harmony. Once aligned, apprentices thread iron nails through the plaque's loops and tap them with rhythmic precision, each strike sending faint ripples through the bronze surface. A hush falls at the final nail drive, 4 nails in total, 1 at each loop. When the plaque sits flush against the wall, Ioba steps forward to inspect. She rubs her fingertips along the plaque's ornate braid patterns, her coral bracelets clicking softly, and nods in satisfaction. A young attendant brings a brass bowl of white kaolin clay paste, which Ioba uses to seal each nail head. The clay, drawn from the Benin river's banks, is believed to ward off insect and water damage, ensuring the bronze endures the tropical rains. As the sun reaches its zenith, the master caster oversees the installation of the obsequial head of Oba Ingibuda, a solemn visage with downcast eyes and a coral-beaded crown. He and Okoti hoist the heavy sculpture into place with a leather sling harness. Apprentices guide it carefully, lest its regal features scrape the wall's rough surface. Once fixed, the head dominates a recessed niche flanked by 2 brass lanterns. Already, servants place palm wine offerings upon a small step below, arriving in quiet procession at midday to pay homage. By late afternoon, the final bronze figure, your warrior plaque, awaits its turn. A small crowd of palace elders and court dignitaries has gathered, their flowing robes bright against the earthen hues of the wall. The Oba himself appears at a courtyard window above, his silhouette framed by the flicker of indoor lamps, and he motions approval. Under his gaze, Ioba and Okoti repeat the alignment ritual, nail placement, and clay sealing. Then, they step back to witness the warrior standing sentinel, spear poised and gaze forward, an embodiment of the kingdom's martial prowess and ancestral continuity. That evening's ritual is both intimate and public. Torches are lit along the palace ramparts and drummers gather beneath the newly mounted bronzes. The OBA descends to the courtyard, where a low dais has been set before the plaques. As he takes his seat, Ioba presents each bronze in turn, reciting the names of former Obas commemorated by the sculptures and extolling their deeds. The drums Ikun and Ikpoka respond with measured rhythms, echoing the pulse of the city itself. Courtiers step forward to pour libations of palm wine into brass goblets and offer them to the Oba, who sips solemnly between each verse. In that charged atmosphere, you notice an uneasy gleam in the eyes of certain elders, a reminder that while bronze binds history to the present, memory can become contested, yet any hint of discord fades as the final flourish approaches. The Oba, rising slowly, clasps the coral-gemmed scepter once more and touches it to each bronze in turn. With each contact, a spark of torchlight flickers across metal, and the assembled court bows in deference. The Oba's voice, amplified by the hall's acoustics, intones, "May these forms stand witness to our lineage, shield us in times of strife, and guide us toward unity." When the ceremony concludes, torchbearers light the palace corridors, in the dance of shifting shadows. You walk among the newly installed bronzes etched, now suffused with ritual power, and feel the still air hum with ancestral presence. Okoti places a hand on the warrior plaque's shoulder, as though greeting an old friend. "Metal may be cold," he says quietly, "but here it breathes with our past." Ioba, watching from the rampart steps, smiles and replies, "And so must we," breathing life into memory. As you retire that night to a guest chamber beneath a palace roof, you reflect on the journey, from sunlit kildens and clay pits to the hushed recitation of oaths in the grand hall. The Benin bronzes, though crafted by human hands, transcend mere sculpture. They are living archives that bind king to smith, ancestor to subject, spirit to city. Their creation and consecration reveal a society in which artistry and ritual intertwine to reinforce political authority and communal identity. But you wonder, in a world ever shifting by external trade, colonial encroachment, and evolving cultural exchanges, can these traditions endure unchanged? If new materials or foreign influences tempt future artisans, will the palace rituals adapt or be abandoned altogether? And in distant centuries, when these very bronzes lie scattered in museums far from Benin City, will they still whisper of ivory thrones, coral bead crowns, and the measured toll of iron bells that first awakened their metal souls? Reflection. The story of Benin's bronzes is more than an account of remarkable craftsmanship. It is a testament to how art, spirituality, and power converge. Each casting, consecration, and installation forged bonds between past and present, ruler and ruled, clay and metal. As objects of courtly veneration and ancestral reverence, these bronzes carried both the weight of history and the promise of continuity. Their enduring legacy reminds us that cultural resilience often depends on the rituals we enact, the memories we cherish, and the care we take to pass both down through generations, ensuring that even when stones crumble and empires fade, the human spirit endures through its art. Ottoman ink makers and the Sultan's manuscript workshops. You arrive at the Topkapi Palace just before dawn, when the Bosphorus mists still pool in the palace gardens and the call to prayer drifts from distant minarets. Behind the high walls of the palace's second courtyard, a low building of white-painted timber awaits, the imperial workshop of the Nakashain, the court's manuscript atelier. Faint light filters through latticed windows, falling upon rows of wooden desks, each piled with tools of the calligraphers and illuminators. Trade brass inkwells inlaid with gold filigree, sable hairbrushes resting on carved ivory holders, and thin sheets of imported European paper laid flat on tanned goatskin stretched frames. Your host is Master Kakir, head of the Ink Makers Guild and appointed by the Ahulislam himself to oversee the preparation of inks, pigments, and binding media for all court manuscripts. He greets you in a robe of indigo-dyed silk and slippers embroidered with gold thread. His calm voice reverberates in the vaulted room as he explains that every volume commissioned by the Sultan, be it a Quran copy, a history of the Ottoman conquests, or a treatise on astronomy, depends on inks and pigments mixed here. Under careful ritual, you follow him past shelves lined with dozens of earthenware jars, each sealed with beeswax and labeled in elegant Thulth script: saffron red, lapis, lazuli blue, galangal yellow, and a small jar marked black of Byzantium. This last, Master Kakir explains, is not simply carbon black but a unique blend of burnt olive stones, frankincense, smoke residue, and powdered oak gola, formula first developed under Sultan Bazar II and jealously guarded ever since. In one corner, two apprentices tend a low brazier of smoldering nutshells and dried laurel leaves. The smudge of fragrant smoke is integral to the finest black inks. Its volatile oils bind ink to paper and prevent feathering when calligraphers' pens sweep across the page. Nearby lies a shallow basalt mortar, its interior stained indigo and crimson from centuries of grinding. Master Kakir uses a slender ivory spatula to measure a pinch of powdered lapis lazuli, imported by caravan from Herat, then adds a drop of gum arabic solution and a few grains of honey. He minced the mixture with another spatula, whispering an invocation to an Anyathul, patron saint of scribes, before adding distilled rosewater. The blue paste glows like a captured fragment of sky. Apprentices watch, wide-eyed, knowing this same azure will gild the borders of illuminated pages destined for the Sultan's private library. As the workshop stirs to life, brushes clattering, inkstones tapped, parchment sheets fan. Master Kakir leads you to a low wooden trough filled with maize husk ashes and filtered spring water. Here, parchment sheets are washed to remove residual sizing and smoothed with pumice. He dips a freshly washed sheet into the water and lifts it skyward so the sun's first rays strike the damp surface, revealing fine pits that will hold ink evenly. The ritual of washing and drying parchment, he notes, ensures no blotch undermines a calligrapher's precise Naskh script. By mid-morning, dozens of calligraphers kneel at their desks, pens poised and inkpots open. Yet before a single letter is inscribed, Master Kakir will oversee one final rite: the blessing of inks. He uncorks the jar of black of Byzantium, sprinkles a few ashes onto his palm, murmurs an Ottoman verse of praise, and flicks the residue 3 times above each workbench. The apprentices follow suit, their eyes lowered. Only then do the pens scratch across parchment, forming words that will be transcribed onto pages destined for distant courts or the Sultan's own study. Thus you prepare to witness your first ink test, your own calligraphed line in the Sultan's hand. You wonder what secret properties allow these pigments to endure centuries without fading. And how will this centuries-old ritual adapt as European paper and new printing techniques begin to infiltrate the court? You return to the Nakashain the following afternoon, just as the muezzin's third call to prayer fades across the courtyard. Sunlight slants through the latticed windows, illuminating motes of ink dust dancing over benches strewn with quill shavings and spilled pigment granules. The air smells faintly of beeswax and rosewater. Today, Master Kakir has invited you to follow the entire journey of a manuscript from blank folio to bound codex, so you may appreciate how his inks and pigments shape not only letters and florals, but also the politics and prestige of a great empire. First, you step into the adjoining Mohain, the planning room where head calligraphers sketch layouts in charcoal on large templates. Here, Kakir points to a wooden table strewn with charcoal sticks, rulers, and a single half-finished diagram of an illuminated opening page destined for the Manakibul Urqad, a hagiography of Sufi saints commissioned by the Grand Vizier. The layout shows 3 columns of text beneath a gilded arch of floral arabesques accented in lapis blue and coral red. Beneath these arches, 2 rounds of small gold leaf dots indicate where gold highlights will sparkle. Kakir explains that each ink color is chosen to reflect themes within the text: the deep indigo of heavenly wisdom, the soft saffron yellow of spiritual light, and black's solemn authority. From the Ikmohain, you walk into a quiet annex where a dozen master calligraphers practice their craft on sheets of discarded test parchment. Each uses a reed pen dipped in Kakir's prized Morocco black to write verses from the Sultan Ahmed I's own poems. You watch as one calligrapher, Hassan Effendi, lifts his brush in precise arcs to form the graceful curves of Thulth script. His letters are perfectly spaced, their strokes both bold and featherlight. To achieve such consistency, his pens are cut to an exact angle and size, and his inks must flow with neither hesitation nor puddling. Upon his desk sits an inkwell so worn and polished that the brass nearly shines through its dull pattern, evidence of centuries of use. You notice that Hassan pauses frequently to test his ink, blotting small strokes on a scrap nearby. "One drop too much rosewater and the ink will run," he murmurs. "Too little, and it will cling like gum, dragging as I write." He presses the nib to the test sheet, watches the lines swell, then dabs a few grains of gum arabic into his inkwell to firm the flow. It is this delicate balance, part chemistry, part ritual, that gives Ottoman manuscripts their legendary clarity and grace. Meanwhile, in an adjacent room, two apprentices work at a low wooden tank, simmering saffron threads in wine vinegar to extract their golden hue. Through small holes in the room's wooden shutters, sunlight falls upon the simmering pot. The apprentices' girls, named Fatima and Axta, with long ebony spoons carved with mystical inscriptions. They wear simple cotton headscarves, and their sleeves are rolled to the elbows. Fatima tells you that each day at dawn she gathers bundles of fresh saffron from palace gardens, then measures precisely 50 strands per liter of vinegar, an inherited rule from her grandmother, who once served Sultan Suleiman's court. The pungent steam perfumes the workshop, and a drop of the saffron-infused liquid yields a pale yellow dye that will brighten white backgrounds, gilded borders, and attar-scented bindings. From inks and pigments, you move to Mehendashain, the mixing room where Kakir and his senior apprentices grind and blend. Here, he oversees the final preparation of an emerald green pigment made by pulverizing malachite stones imported from Cyprus. Apprentice Mustafa runs the dense powder through a fine silk sieve, ensuring no grit remains. Malachite green fades under heat, Mustafa explains, so we grind early in the morning when temperatures are low, then store it in sealed jars wrapped in felt. The pigment will later be mixed with gum arabic to produce a thick paste suitable for painting borders and miniature figures. As day gives way to dusk, the workshop's rhythm shifts. Candles flicker and the calligraphers retire to their desks with leather-bound inkpots and water dropper flasks. You notice that each desk is assigned a different hue of candle wax: red for the chief illuminator, blue for the head scribe, so that assistants know at a glance whose station is whose. The wax has been purchased that morning from palace stores, sealed with the OBA's royal cipher and stamped before distribution to prevent theft. On the corner, a group of junior illuminators gathers around a single, enormously thick folio already inscribed with text, now awaiting intricate ornamentation. Master illuminator Halima leans over and dips her fine squirrel hair brush into the saffron yellow. With cautious strokes, she begins painting a stylized vine winding along the margin. As you watch, the yellow vine glows warm under candlelight, its edges outlined in black ink for definition. Beyond her, another illuminator, Becker, uses a minute knife to shave gold leaf sheets from a wooden block. He then applies delicate fragments into minute recesses in the vine's petals, pressing them gently with a tuft of cotton. The entire scene is so quiet you can hear the faint rasp of gold leaf against paper. You pause to reflect on how each pigmentan alchemy of mineral, plant, or risen carries with it a web of trade routes, botanical knowledge, and ritual practice. The lapis from Herat, saffron from palace gardens, malachite from Cyprus, frankincense smoke from Yemenol converge here in this single workshop, destined for volumes that will travel from Istanbul to Cairo and beyond. As evening deepens, Master Kakir convenes a short council of senior artisans. They gather around a low brazier, its coals emitting a steady red glow. Kakir waves a small brass mirror at each ink jar, checking for sediment and clarity. He tastes a drop of the saffron yellow with a wooden toothpick and inhales gently to detect any sourness. Then he addresses the group in quiet tones about tomorrow's royal commission. A gift of illuminated verses to the Persian Shah, celebrating the double victory at the Tigris and Euphrates campaigns. This gift must reflect both Ottoman pride and diplomatic finesse, requiring inks of impeccable hue and stability. You realize that beyond artistic perfection, the ink makers shape international relations. A faded pigment would insult the recipient. A smudged border could be read as carelessness, though each measure of gum, Arabic, rosewater, and honey is more than technical. It is a diplomatic statement. As you prepare to depart, Kakir rises and beckons you closer. He leads you to a locked chest of rare pigments, powdered gold from Mamluk treasuries, the forbidden ermine white pigment of purified chalk, and a small jar labeled dragon's blood, containing the red resin of a tree from Sri Lanka. He lifts the lid on the dragon's blood, releasing a sweet, resinous perfume, used only for the Sultan's personal prayer books. He whispers. Its power is said to illuminate the mind. Holding the jar, you feel the weight of centuries of guarded secrets. These pigments, like the unity of church and state, are both practical materials and metaphors of imperial might. You ponder how, in a world increasingly connected by merchants and missionaries, Ottoman ink makers must guard their formulas while adapting to new demands and materials. As you step back into the palace corridors, the last candle's glow flickers behind you. You carry with you not only a vial of masterfully mixed lapis ink, but also questions. In an age when printed books spread quickly from European presses, will calligraphers and illuminators retain their central place in court life? And as diplomatic gifts flow across borders, will those foreign recipients ever truly appreciate the labor and ritual woven into each drop of ink? Dawn's first light streams again through the latticed shutters of the Nakashain, but today the workshop feels charged with anticipation. By midday, 3 freshly bound manuscripts, each a diplomatic gift for a different foreign court, stand ready on the central dais. Their volumes vary in size and ornamentation. One is a slim Quran commissioned for the Persian Shah, another a richly illuminated history for Vienna's Habsburg envoy, and the third a collection of Ottoman poetry bound in crimson leather for the governor of Cairo. Master Kakir has summoned you to witness their final inspection before couriers carry them abroad. You find him standing beside the dais, his indigo robe edged in subtle gold thread. Around him bustles senior calligraphers, illuminators, and binders, all gathered in hushed reverence. The first volume of Quran lies open to its grand opening folio, where delicate palmette motifs swirl around the basmala, the black calligraphy. It is so crisp that each letter seems etched rather than written, and the gold leaf arabesques glow like dawn through candlelight. Kakir holds a brass-tipped stylus. He gently presses a fingertip into the black Byzantine ink, then touches his fingertip to the margin, leaving a tiny, exacting smudge, a mark of authenticity. The senior calligrapher bows his head. No further corrections are permitted. Next, the envoy's history of Ottoman conquests is presented. Its lapis-laden borders depict stylized tulips and carnations, each petal outlined in fine black ink. Kakir inspects a sample passage on the Battle of Mohacs. The saffron-yellow background beneath the text appears uniform, with no sign of uneven dye or stray pigment. He leans close to inhale the scent of rosewater, then lightly touches the gold leaf punctuation marks. Across the workshop, an illuminator named Ake watches, her gaze half celebratory, half apprehensive. She embroidered those borders before dawn, guided by her family's multi-generational tradition of drawing the imperial gardens in miniature. Kakir meets her eyes and offers a rare nod of approval, then places a hand on her shoulder, a gesture that sends a ripple of pride through the gathered artisans. Finally, he turns to the poetry volume bound in vibrant red leather. Its pages are edged with gilded dots, and its title page bears an elaborate medallion of intertwined dragons rendered in malachite green and dragon's blood red. Kakir flips through quickly, pausing at a couplet praising Sultan Ahmed's patronage of the arts. He tests the malachite pigment with a cotton swab dipped in spring water, no smearing, no dulling. He then extracts a minuscule shard of gold leaf from his inner robe pocket and applies it to the medallion's center, sealing the binding ritual that ensures the book's prosperity-bringing powers. With all 3 manuscripts approved, Kakir beckons you closer. He draws a slender reed pen across the final folio of the Quran to inscribe the date in his personal signature in Thoth script, an unrivaled mark of quality. He repeats this on each gift, each time choosing a slightly different flourish so that each manuscript bears its own distinct hand. Even as they share his mastery, he steps back as the palace librarian, clutching a rope of ivory beads, recites aloud an oath by Allah's grace and the ruler's will. These volumes shall bear our words across seas and courts. May their colors shine unblemished, their scripts remain true, and their prestige restore honor to the Sultan's name. The gathered artisans echo Amin in unison. A drum roll from the adjacent courtyard signals that the imperial courier awaits. Cradle these volumes carefully, Kakir's voice seems to say, for they carry not only ink and pigment but the empire's reputation. Later that afternoon, you join the courier, a lean figure in embroidered kaftan, as he leads a mule-drawn cart through the palace gates toward the Galata Bridge. Before departing, he offers Kakir a bow, then lifts the Quran's velvet-wrapped case and presses it against his chest. Under its cover, he tucks the history and poetry volumes under one arm. The mule's hooves clop over the cobblestones as you watch them vanish among merchants and dock workers. A sea of faces, smells, and languages dot. As the cart disappears, you pause at the bridge's midpoint and gaze out over water that reflects minarets and merchant sails. You recall the saffron threads, crushed malachite, and Byzantine black that brought these manuscripts to life. You remember Hassan Effendi's penstrokes and Halima's golden vines. Each drop of ink, each grain of pigment, required knowledge, careful ritual, and unwavering precision. In that moment, you consider the fate of these precious volumes. On the Sultan's orders, they will traverse deserts and mountain passes before reaching distant courts. They may cross paths with intrigued scholars, ambitious officials, or rival diplomats. Their inks may fade under harsh sunlight or water. Spots or their wax seals might crack in winter's cold. Yet for now, they are perfect hand. Perfectibility itself is part of their power. As you turn back toward the palace, its domes glinting in the late sun, you realize that the story of Ottoman ink makers is not simply about pigments and pens. It is about an empire that invested in artistry as a means of communication, competition, and cooperation. The ink makers' rituals bound core to craft, spirit to material, sultan to subject. Their work shaped not just manuscripts but perceptions of Ottoman sophistication and durability. Walking across the bridge, you carry more than the memory of royal commissions. You carry a deeper question. In an age when printed text will soon revolutionize how knowledge spreads, will this union of ritual and craftsmanship survive? And if it does, how will these artisans adapt their ink formulas, blending new materials, without losing the sacred essence that once bound ink to empire? Regardless of what the future holds, you know this. Every stroke of ink you witnessed was an act of cultural assertion, a deliberate stand against impermanence. And though you may never see those manuscripts again, their pigments and scripts have already woven themselves into the tapestry of history, an indelible testament to human creativity, devotion, and the mysterious alchemy of words made visible. Hakkien salt harvesters of Lake Chenghe. One night, we journey to southern China, to the rolling hills surrounding Lake Chenghai, where for centuries Hakkien villagers have harvested salt from the shallow alkaline waters. Imagine a misty dawn, the air faintly pungent with mineral brine. As you step onto weathered wooden planks laid across the lake's edge, your straw sandals sink slightly into damp mud, and a chorus of early morning croaks and birdsong greets you. Before you stretches a grid of low clay pans, no deeper than a finger's width, outlined by narrow earthen embankments. These are the sultans, where every harvest begins. You meet your guide, Elder Lin Mei, a salt farmer whose family has worked these pans for 5 generations, her hands calloused, cracked, and sprinkled with pale salt crystals. Gently as she explains the cycle of salt making, the annual flood that refills the lake, the slow recession of waters through spring, and the arrival of summer sun that transforms brine into flaky crystals. Behind her, 2 apprentices, one barefoot boy of 12, a girl of 14 with hair tied in a loose bun, kneel at a pan's edge, sweeping the water aside with flat wooden ladles carved for the purpose. Lin Mei leads you to the central shed, a simple open-sided structure of bamboo and thatch. Inside, clay jars of various sizes stand on low shelves. Each jar contains samples, one of milky brine freshly drawn, another of coarse wet salt, a third of dried crystals that clink like ice when shaken. Lin Mei dips a slender bamboo scoop into the brine sample and lets a single drop fall onto her forearm. Taste, she says softly. You touch the saline bead to your tongue. There is a faint tempest of minerals beyond sodium chloride, hints of magnesium and calcium. The lake's unique signature. She produces a shallow wooden bowl and mixes a spoonful of dried salt crystals with a spoonful of local rice wine. Swirling the mixture, she breathes in deeply. This blend, she explains, is reserved for morning tea leaves, steeped in brine, seasoned with wine. It warms the body after night chills and fortifies the spirit before long hours under sun. You consider this strange recipe a ritual born of necessity and subtle taste. Would you sip it willingly once the sun climbs higher and fatigue sets in? Leaving the shed, Lin Mei guides you across a narrow embankment to a sultan already half evaporated by the sun's glare. Here dozens of shallow pans gleam like mirrors in soft dawn light. Apprentices fan out, each wielding a small wooden scraper coax, forming crystals into neat piles. The scraping is rhythmic, almost meditative. Scrape, lift, turn, deposit. The apprentices' movements synchronize as if dancing, though their faces betray concentration under wide-brimmed straw hats. Each pan yields slightly different crystal shapes on coarse, jagged plates. Others find sparkling grains depending on subtle variations in water depth, pan substrate, and sun exposure. You kneel beside the girl apprentice, Yu Qin, who shows you how to angle the scraper just enough to lift crystals without tearing the clay pan's top layer. She explains in hushed tones that if the scraper grooves too deeply, the pan must be repaired with fresh clay labor added to the day's toil. You run your fingertips over a pan edge. It feels smooth, except where a small crack has formed already, mended with a damp plug of red earth. Even this micro-repair carries significance. A well-maintained pan ensures a pure harvest, free of mud flecks. As the sun climbs, your hat's shadow retreats and the air warms sharply. Lin Mei gestures toward distant hills where salt pans stretch like patchwork quilts across the lakeshore. Each family holds a designated number of pans, inherited through ancestral rites and recorded in wooden tally tablets kept under the village shrine's guardian salt idol. This idol, a carved stone figure coated in salt glaze, stands at the shrine's center, its white surfaces slowly dissolving in seasonal rains and rebuilt each year in a solemn rite. You imagine the care involved. Grinding fresh clay, firing small bricks, then glazing and recoating with salt paste before reinstalling the idol. Returning along the embankments, you pass a cluster of drying racks where piles of harvested salt rest on woven mats under bamboo awnings. Apprentices turn the piles gently with bamboo forks, exposing crystals to breeze while shielding them from midday dew. Lin Mei explains that this two-stage drying, first under sun, then under shadow, cleaner, whiter salt, then direct sun alone. She scoops a handful of near-dry crystals and lets them sift between her fingers. They shine like crushed gemstones. By midday, the central shed's bell rings a hollow clang signaling midday rest. Apprentices gather mats under a banyan tree and sit cross-legged to share bowls of tea and salted rice cakes. You join them, biting into a slightly chewy cake laced with sesame seeds and a pinch of salt that deepens its sweetness. Elder Lin Mei raises her cup in a quiet toast to salt that seasons our fields and our lives. All around you nods, and soft almonds ripple through the circle. You sip your tea and watch apprentices rest beneath the banyan's broad canopy, their hats pulled low. You recall how each pan, each scrape, each crystal carries stories of past harvests, floods, and family feuds over pan boundaries. You wonder, as modern fertilizers and commercial salt vendors encroach, can these ancestral rites and delicate rituals endure? And what will become of Lake Shanghai's living sultans when rural youths migrate to distant cities, leaving the pans untended? Tonight, as you lie on a simple straw mat in the village guest house, the scent of brine still clinging to your clothes, you ponder the fragile balance between tradition and change. How, you wonder, will Hekian salt harvesters adapt when salt tastes no longer bind them to the land, and ancient taboos clash with modern convenience? When you awaken the next morning, the sky is overcast and a soft breeze stirs the salt tints. The cool air offers relief from the previous day's sun, but the overcast sky threatens delayed crystal formation. Elder Lin Mei greets you at the central shed, her face framed by wisps of salt-stiffened hair under her straw hat. A cloudy day, she murmurs, but our work continues. Rain may come, but sultans must be tended. You follow her as she leads the apprentices back to their pans, and you begin to see how generations of Hekian adaptation have turned this lake's volatile waters into a reliable livelihood. First, Lin Mei brings you to a pan with unusually slow evaporation. The clay floor is damp and dark, and the scattered crystals are sparse and coarse. She kneels and tests the substrate with her thumb. The pan's clay has absorbed too much brine, she notes, pressing deeper until a thin film of water wells up. She collects a pinch of the clay-water mixture and rubs it between her fingers. Too rich, she declares, we must adjust. She orders 2 apprentices to fetch fresh clay from the western bank, where the soil is richer in sand and lighter in color. This nearby deposit yields clay that resists over-absorption, promoting more even evaporation. While the apprentices cart wheelbarrows of clay back to the pad, Lin Mei explains the importance of the pan's composition. Centuries ago, she says, our ancestors discovered that not all lake beds yielded equal salt. Some pans produced bitter crystals, others yielded fishy impurities. Trial and error, over decades, taught us which clay to use. You imagine early villagers experimenting, adding clay from delta floodplains or hillside creeks, noting the taste and color of each harvest and perhaps discarding whole seasons. Work before learning the optimal blend. As the new clay is mixed into the pan floor, you watch the apprentices use wooden trowels to spread and level it, then pack it with tamping sticks to ensure a smooth surface. Lin Mei inspects their work, her keen eye spotting a tiny ridge too high or a depression too deep. A perfect pan is a level 1. Even a few millimeters of unevenness can cause brine to pool in corners, leaving wet spots that refuse to crystallize. Next, Lin Mei takes you to a family on Saltern on the lake's northern shore. Here, an elder farmer named Li Wan, stooped with age and wrapped in a worn cotton robe, oversees his grandchildren at work. His pans are smaller, split off from his father's holdings decades ago when land divisions forced the clan to negotiate. Shares. You learn that Lake Shanghai sultans are communal but strictly inherited. Each family's holdings are recorded on strips of bamboo stored in the village archive. Li Huan's share came with the stipulation that he maintain identical proportions of pans on the east, west, north, and south shores, ensuring no family monopolizes a favored microclimate. As you kneel beside Li Huan, he points to a cluster of greenish crystals along the pan's edge. Algal bloom, he explains. When winter rains bring nutrients into the lake, certain algae flourish and cling to clay. They stain our salt. To remove these impurities, he and his apprentices rake the bloom into piles, then scoop it away, an arduous, slow process that delays harvest until mid-season. Better to have pure salt late than tainted salt early. He shrugs, his lined face reflecting a lifetime of such compromises. From algae, you move to the challenge of seasonal changes. Lin Mei guides you to a high embankment overlooking the lake levee. Beyond this barrier, a small stream channels rainwater from the hills. During heavy rains, silt-laden runoff pours into the lake, raising both water level and turbidity. To protect the sultans, villagers perform an annual ritual on the eve of the monsoon. They gather at the levee, chanting old salt hymns and sprinkling rice flour along the embankment's crest. The flour marks any weak spots, where villagers then reinforce the earthen wall with fresh mud and bamboo stakes. You join the ritual under a low-slung rain cloud, the air tinged with As the last beads of monsoon moisture drift off, Lin Mei leads the group in a chant. Salt of earth and sky's bright tears hold back the floods through coming years. You feel the gravity of this moment. These levees are not only practical barriers but sacred pacts between the Hakkian people and the forces of nature. Should the levee fail, fields would flood, pans would wash away, and families would lose their inheritance. Back at the pans, you witnessed how villagers adjust to seasonal rhythms. In early summer, they spread mats of sunflower stems over newly started pans to filter incoming rainwater and shade early crystal beds. By late summer, they remove the filters and add silt from the leveed canals to increase brine concentration. Another lesson from ancestral experimentation. Every action carries echoes of past sorrows and successes. Famine-era floods that destroyed pans, drought years when no salt formed, and years when salt harvests sustained trade caravans bound for Guangzhou and beyond. By afternoon, you observe apprentices repurposing leftover clay patches into decorative motifs for sacramental jars. They carve simple lotus blossoms into bowl rims, reminders that art and labor intertwine. Lin Mei explains that each family's salt jars are with symbols of prosperity: fish for abundance, cranes for longevity, and peonies for honor. These jars, once filled with their freshly harvested salt, become part of a family's dowry when young women marry, carrying the salt's taste in its legacy to new households. As dusk approaches, Lin Mei leads you to a solitary where harvested salt crystals lie in neat piles, ready for final drying. She kneels and selects a single pile, touching it lightly. "These pans," she says, "belong to my cousin, a young man who left for the city. His pans lie idle each afternoon because he fails to return from work on time. Next year, his share may be redistributed." Her words expose a growing tension. Modern wages in urban centers tempt Hakkian youth to abandon ancestral toil, risking both salt harvests and the fragile inheritance system. As evening shadows lengthen, you return to the village, carrying the weight of these struggles. You'll recall the hymns, the levee rituals, and the careful clay blends. Each measure of salt is born of precise labor, tribal memory, and communal obligation. You wonder, when modern livelihoods lure the next generation away, who will chant the monsoon hymns or test clay pan mixtures? And when the ancestral bowls crack, who will carve the lotus motifs that bind salt to family honor? That evening, as the last lanterns flicker in the village square, Elder Lin Mei summons you to the lakeshore one final time. The air is thick with humidity, and the distant hills are silhouetted against a deep indigo sky. In the soft glow of a single oil lamp, villagers gather around a low wooden platform heaped with drying salt. Each family has contributed a portion. Small pyramids of ivory crystals stacked neatly on woven mats. Tonight is the sealing ceremony, when salt harvests are formally counted, blessed and sealed in clay jars for trade and storage. Lin Mei gestures to a row of jars arranged before you. They vary in size from squat gourds, bound in bamboo bands, to tall, slender amphorae wrapped in reed matting. Each jar bears its family's carved symbol: cranes, lotus blossoms, rice stalks. The crowd murmurs as the village headman, Master Shao, steps forward with a bowl of rice wine infused with sunset-hued saffron. He pours a small measure into each jar's lip, then traces the rim with a thin line of fresh clay, sealing in both salt and blessing. "By salt and by earth," Master Zhao intones, "we vow to uphold our inheritance, our hymns and our levees. May these crystals feed our kin and trade beyond these hills." At his final word, the crowd utters a unified Amin, and Lin Mei places a single star-shaped salt crystal atop each sealed jar, an emblem of hope that the harvest will shine, even in distant markets. That's the ceremony ends. You notice Li Huan, the elderly saltsman, quietly slip away from the gathering. You follow him to a small shed where he lifts the lid on a wooden box filled with worn tally tablets, bamboo strips strung on cords. He points to 2 empty slots. "My share must shrink," he says, voice soft. "My grandson will take my pans next season, but he works in the city now. He visits only at harvest's end." You feel the ache of generations' labor hanging in the balance. Meanwhile, apprentices light small bonfires beside the jars, their smoke scented with pine needles. They burn leftover straw mats and lotus stems, creating perfumed smoke that drifts over the jars as a final purifying ritual. You watch the aromatic tendrils curl skyward, carrying prayers for rain, protection, and enduring tradition. After the fires die to embers, Elder Lin Mei invites you to taste the harvest porridge, a simple gruel of millet, wild greens, and a pinch of lake salt. You sit on a low bench beside her, cradling a wooden bowl. The porridge is both earthy and subtly briny, reminder that salt nourishes not just fields and trade, but bodies and spirits. Lin Mei inhaled deeply and smiles. "This porridge," she says, "binds us to the lake and to one another. It tastes of home." As you finish your meal, Lin Mei leads you to a quiet fishing pier jutting into the lake. Under a crescent moon, the water's surface mirrors ripples of silver. She holds up a small, translucent crystal and asks, "Do you see how the moonlight refracts through it?" Each pane of salt is a tiny lens, carrying our light to far lands. You marvel at this poetic vision. Salt as both commodity and conduit, binding villagers to world beyond. You recall the apprentices who scrape pans at dawn, the clay levees fortified by ritual, and the sealed jars bearing family symbols, each step in the harvest from choosing the right clay to carving lotus motifs has shaped not only salt's flavor but its meaning. As dawn approaches and the first birds call, you reflect on the central question of this story. How will Lake Shanghai's salt harvest endure as young Hakkian families drift toward distant cities? You imagine technology's solar evaporation, mechanized pans promised by modern salt companies. Such efficiency might boost yields but risk erasing ancestral knowledge. The secret clay blends, monsoon hymns, and saffron-steeped teas. You rise and bid farewell to Lin Mei. She presses a sealed jar into your hands. "Carry our salt's story with you," she says quietly. You slip it into your pack, the jar's clay seal cool beneath your fingers. Walking back through the silent village, you see smoke curling from a few remaining hearths, the bamboo wind chimes at doorframes singing a last note before stillness. Above, the sky brightens too pale blue, another cycle beginning. You step onto the path toward the distant city, the weight of the jar grounding you in Lake Shanghai's rights. You understand that salt here is more than seasoning or commerce. It is a tapestry of environment, ritual, family, and memory delicately maintained against the currents of change. And as you head toward tomorrow's unknowns, you carry Lin Mei's question with you. Will the next generation of Hakkian salt harvesters preserve the pans, the hymns, and their inheritance, or will modern tides wash away this fragile craft? The Oba's coronation rituals tonight. You arrive at the heart of Benin City just before dawn. The sky is still a deep indigo, punctuated by the first flickers of torchlight carried by palace guards. From your vantage near the Iwefbo, the broad, earthen ramparts that ring the royal precinct, you watch as trumpeters in bright cloth tunics stand poised on the raised embankment. Their long, thin, ivory horns glint in torchlight, ready to herald the day's momentous event, the coronation of the new Oba. You slip past the bark-clad sentries and enter the palace's outer courtyard, where hundreds of courtiers, dignitaries, and invited guests converge in hushed anticipation. The air carries a mingled scent of damar resin incense and freshly roasted yams, a reminder that this ceremony blends spiritual offering with civic feast. As you move toward the central plaza, you pass rows of women draped in coral bead necklaces and dyed cloth, silently fanning charcoal braziers to keep the air clear. Their eyes are fixed on the inner hall's beeswax lanterns, as if each glow marks a step closer to the moment when a mortal man will become divine ruler at the plaza's center. Stands a low platform draped in crimson velvet, its front edge embroidered with the Oba's leopard motif. Surrounding it are four tall, ivory tusk symbols of royal power, each balanced in a stilted wooden base carved with twisting vines. Behind the tusks rises the igwa, a slender wooden staff topped with a carved hand holding a crossbar, its arms festooned with palm fiber bundles dyed indigo. This staff, you learn, once belonged to Oba Ezugi, who first used it to unite warring clans. Now it will sanction the new ruler's divinely ordained authority. As the eastern sky lightens, the trumpeters raise their horns. A low resonant note rolls across the courtyard, calling every attendee's attention. Immediately a hush descends. In that silence, you feel the weight of centuries, coronations before you, each echoing in the clay beneath your feet. Then the trumpets release a melody of ascending calls, its rhythm slow and dignified, as if urging time itself to pause. From the palace's inner gate appears a procession. First, 8 ivory carvers carrying chests of coral beads. Next, 4 brass casters bearing bronze vessels filled with palm oil. Then, royal drummers in a single file, their double-headed drums slung across shoulders and skins dampened with sacred water. Drums begin a measured beat, dum-dum-dum-dum, synchronizing with the trumpets in a ceremonial duet. You edge closer as the next entourage approaches. The Oda group of palace diviners dressed in leopard pelts and crowned with ostrich feathers. Their faces are streaked in white chalk patterns, each symbol denoting their spiritual lineage. They bear behind their back carved rattles, which they shake with solemn purpose, calling on ancestral spirits to witness and bless the new reign. As they pass, you feel their gaze rest upon you briefly, assessing your intentions before they turn toward the platform. Then, at last, a hush so absolute you hear your own breath. The double gates to the inner palace open slowly, revealing the royal courtyard beyond. The coral chief, resplendent in a robe woven from thousands of red beads, and the Ioba, the queen mother, step forward. Their coral collars rise like petals, framing their faces. The Ioba's long robe trails behind her, its hem embroidered with tiny bronze bells that jingle softly as she moves. They advance to the foot of the platform, bows low, heads inclined. Behind them, 4 senior chiefs bear the royal horse, the ivory tusk symbolizing the Oba's spirit housed in the palace shrine. They carry it as though it were both burden and blessing, its tip gilded in leaf gold. Next come the essence, the cola merchants, clutching woven baskets of cola nuts, their glossy red sheen contrasting with the ivory and coral. Each chief offers a handful of nuts to the coral chief, who in turn divides them among the diviners for a ceremonial tasting. Cola, you recall, symbolizes unity and hospitality, its bitterness balanced by communal sharing. Finally, the moment arrives. The senior brass caster brings forward the bronze crown, a flat circular cap adorned with tiny leopard heads in repousse. He lifts it reverently, holding it aloft like the rising sun, its polished surface flickering with torchlight. All heads bow. With deliberate slowness, the coral chief places the crown upon the head of Prince Oranmian, who until this moment has remained veiled behind an ivory shawl. The prince stands unmoving as the crown's weight settles, a man transformed into Oba of Benin, spiritual nexus between earth and sky. A single drumbeat resonates, followed by a piercing trumpet call. The Ioba raises her hands and cries out the Ariki, the Aba's praise poem by the leopard's might, by ivory's gleam. He stands between worlds, in ancestors' dream. Her voice rises above the drums, weaving ancient poetry with each line of assembled chiefs' echo key phrases. Their voices weaving a tapestry of sound that seems to bind past to present. You sense a palpable shift in the air. The OBA moves to the platform's crest, stepping lightly despite his new regalia's weight. He turns slowly, offering his back to the coral chief. That gesture, you learn, symbolizes his willingness to receive ancestral power from behind, from the past. Then he turns front-facing, extending arms to the 4 cardinal points, acknowledging his domain's full extent. The trumpets swell again, and the brass casters pour palm oil from the bronze vessels onto the Oba's garb, each drop crackling as it meets cloth, anointing him with the substance that preserves and nourishes. The diviners circle him, scattering handfuls of rice and palm fiber, sprinkling blessings across the platform like confetti of hope. As the ceremony transitions into feasting and gift-giving, you step away to reflect on what you have witnessed. Each element, the ivory, the coral, the brass, the cola, the crown, has drawn on layers of symbolism developed over centuries. The ceremony sealed not only a new reign but renewed the cosmos harmony as defined by Benin tradition. Yet questions remain. Outside these walls, the kingdom faces growing contact with Portuguese merchants and European intruders. How will foreign trade goods, guns, textiles, alcohol reshape the Oba's authority in these sacred rituals? Will the ancestral patents endure when pith helmets and printed cloth arrive, and as Oranmian Ekinzua begins his reign? How will he balance innovation with preservation, forging a path between ancestral duty and the modern world's currents? When dawn light filters through the palace's intricately carved wooden screens, the new Oba's first day of rule begins in earnest. You return to the inner court, where a hush falls over the gathered chiefs as the coral chief presents a folded hide scroll. Its surface, once blank, now bears the Oba's newly adopted Arikia lineage poem penned in red ochre. The scroll is unfurled before Oranmian Ekinzua, who inspects each line, tracing the characters with coral-tipped fingers. These verses, declaring his descent from legendary leopard kings and sea traders, will be recited at festivals throughout the year, ensuring his memory endures in song and speech. As he approves, the Ariki for palace scribes step forward, dipping quills into bronze inkwells fashioned from repurposed brass casters' molds. Their hands move in practiced strokes across the scroll, rendering the Oba's title and obeisances in Edo script. You watch the ink's metallic sheen catch morning light, a reminder that these words will outlast clay, cloth, and marble. Next, the Obe proceeds to the Hall of Judgment, where 5 royal spokesmen stand ready to swear fealty. Each spokesman carries a slender staff carved with his family's emblem: a crocodile, a vulture, a fish, a tortoise, a serpent. They kneel one by one, placing staff tips against the Oba's feet and pledging loyalty in soft, measured tones. By these symbols, they intone, "We bind our names and fortunes to your reign." The OBA listens without comment, then touches each staff's tip with his scepter, a carved ebony staff capped in coral, affirming the oath. You follow the procession outside to the Royal Trading Pavilion, where Portuguese merchants await with striped baize cloth, iron tools, and small glass beads. They bow respectfully. The OBA inspects their wares, selecting lengths of cloth to gift chiefs whose support solidified his coronation. You note the subtle exchange: foreign cloth for coral medals, each gift symbolizing alliances both new and ancient. As the Oba samples a bead necklace from the merchants, he nods, then returns to native coral strands, signifying that while foreign trade is welcome, indigenous treasures retain primacy. After midday, the Oba journeys to the ancestral shrine beneath the palace ramparts. A narrow stairway leads to a dark inner chamber filled with bronze altars, each bearing ancestral heads, masterful sculptures of past Obas. Their serene gazes, carved in high relief, watch him pass. At the chamber's center sits a large bronze head representing the founder king. The Oba kneels before it, placing the palm oil-soaked crown relic atop the shrine's railing. Priests incantate prayers in Yoruba language, an ancient tongue older than written, record asking spirits to guide the new Oba steps. You sense a shift in tone as the Orba's sole attendant pours libations of palm wine at the shrine's feet. The wine fizzes softly as it meets hot bronze, drops a spill onto the floor, sending glints of liquid light across the walls. The Orba's face, cast in lantern glow, reflects both solemn duty and youthful resolve. Here, in the shrine's darkness, history feels weighty, each ancestral head a testament to reigns long past, each libation a bridge to realms unseen. Emerging back into daylight, the Orba dons a different robe, a heavy cloth dyed deep indigo, with camwood and stamped with brass seals in repeating patterns. This garment marks his new administrative authority. He seats himself on a low open-air dais flanked by advisors and scribes. From baskets, courtiers present petitions, land disputes, tax appeals, requests for royal markets. The Orba listens, nodding and speaking measured replies. His voice, though calm, carries the ceremonial clarity taught in youth. Brief phrases in Edo, followed by translations in Portuguese for visiting dignitaries. A hush descends as a young woman steps forward, petitioning for land restitution seized by a high chief decades ago. She speaks softly, her garment patched and worn. The OBA pauses, then raises his hand. Your grievance is heard, he declares. A scribe records the judgment, restoration of her field, punitive fines for the usurping chief. The crowd stirs, some in relief, some in resentment. You realize this act, though routine, demonstrates the Orba's power to right ancestral wrongs, but also ignites potential rivalries as afternoon sun wanes. Drums summon the Obe to the palace kitchens, where a feast is prepared. Steam rises from clay pots brimming with pounded yam and pepper soup. Chiefs gather in loose clusters, sampling bowls of egusi stewed with palm oil and spiced fish. You taste a morsel smoky, earthy, with a subtle heat matching the day's gravity. Courtiers murmur over dishes. He rules with mercy. His first judgments favor the humble. Trade gifts secured Portuguese goodwill. But beneath the pleasantries, you glimpse undercurrents of tension. A neighboring chief absent from the feast, his place vacant. You learn he protested the Orba's coronation, claiming his grandmother's lineage entitled him to share rituals. His absence hints at a dispute that may fester, and you recall Li Huan's worries from the salt ceremony. Ancestral rites eroding as modern pressures mount as twilight deepens. Palace trumpeters sound a final cadence, and lanterns flicker on. The OBA departs for the women's quarters, where the Ioba awaits. There, in private ceremony, she will anoint her son again, this time in water scented with neem leaves, symbolizing maternal blessing and purification. You know these private rites will remain hidden from most eyes, preserved by palace ladies sworn to silence. Watching the Orba's procession vanish, you reflect on his evolving roles. Divine figurehead, judge, diplomat, son, and now a link in an unbroken chain of ancestors. You understand coronation rituals are more than pageantry. They reaffirm cosmic order but also expose fault lines, land claims, trade dependencies, generational divides. As you depart under starry sky, you carry the question pressing at your mind. Will Aranmian Akanzua's balanced judgments and measured diplomacy maintain harmony among chiefs and merchants alike, or will foreign sugar and musk disrupt centuries-old customs? Late that night, the palace corridors fall silent, save for the soft echo of sandals on polished wood. You slip past rows of sleeping guards to the Ioba's chamber, where the Queen Mother awaits by a small brazier. Its glow reveals her lined face and ornate coral crown, each bead polished by decades of ritual handling. This private anointing is the culmination of the coronation rites, a moment unseen by most but vital to the ABA's full empowerment. The Ioba pours a silver bowl of water infused with crushed neem leaves onto a shallow wooden tray carved with leopard motifs. She chants softly in an old dialect, her voice low yet resonant. By mother's hand and ancestral grace, wash away doubt, embrace your place. As the final syllables fade, she dips a cluster of frankincense into the water and sprinkles droplets onto the OBA's forehead, shoulders, and palms. Each anointing gesture seals his bond to both maternal lineage and divine mandate. When the rite concludes, she presses a single star-shaped salt crystal harvested from Lake Shanghai to his lips. The crystal's faint brine taste links Orba and people, reminding him that even sovereign power rests on humble labor. You realize how seamlessly the coronation weaves public pageantry with secret ceremonies. In the inner chamber, lineage and spirit coalesce. In the public courtyard, authority and law are proclaimed. Both spheres, one visible, one hidden, ensure the Oba's legitimacy stands on multiple pillars: tradition, divine sanction, and communal consent. As the first roosters crow beyond the palace walls, you accompany the OBA to the river's edge for one final ritual, the blessing of waters. A small flotilla of carved canoe houses drifts where the Euro River meets the Benin Lagoon. The Oba steps onto a carved platform at the waterline, accompanied by the choral chief and 4 brass casters bearing bronze bowls. On the platform's center rests the Oba's polished sword, its hilt wrapped in coral threads. The choral chief raises his hand. By these waters that feed our fields, by this blade that guards our realm, we consecrate your reign. He pours water from a bronze bowl onto the sword's tip, causing droplets to scatter into the river. Then the oba dips the sword's point into the lagoon and lifts it high, its steel blade catching dawn's light. A circle of drummers strikes a bright, joyous rhythm, and villagers lining the banks cheer in softly rising chorus. You feel the culmination of ceremonies ripple outward. The oba's private anointing, public enthronement, judicial mandates, and now this blessing of nature's lifeblood. Each ritual speaks to a different dimension of rule, spiritual, civic, economic, environmental, yet all converge in the man now bearing the coral crown as the flotilla returns to shore. Villagers press forward with gifts, carved ivory tusks, woven palm mats, baskets of yam tubers. Each offering acknowledges the oba's role as provider and protector. You watch families press forward, cheeks flushed with honor, hoping for his nod or smile. The oba greets each with gravitas, accepting gifts with obeisance before returning them with small tokens, coral-adorned anklets or beaded headpieces. Finally, the morning sun climbs clear and bright. The choral chief signals the end of rites. Torches are extinguished. Drums fall silent. The oba, now fully empowered, back to the palace gate, his retinue parting to create a human corridor. You stand at the entry as he departs, the new monarch's silhouette framed by carved brass doors. You reflect on the day's layered ceremonies, the public crowning, courtroom judgments, secret anointing, river blessing. In each ritual, you saw how Benin's power structure balances competing forces, tradition and trade, male authority and maternal sanction, terrestrial justice and spiritual decree. The oba's coronation emerges not as a single grand event, but as an interwoven tapestry of rites, each thread reinforcing the central role of the king and the community that sustains him. As you leave the palace precincts, the city awakes around you. Market stalls open, blacksmiths light forges, fishermen push their canoes into the lagoon. Life moves forward under a newly crowned oba, whose first day has shown both unity and fault lines. The neighboring chief's absence earlier remains a silent question mark, as does the oba's evolving relations with Portuguese merchants. Yet for now, the rituals have bound past and present, binding Aranminekenzua's fate to ancestral heads, coral beads, kola offerings, and the river's flowing waters in the months to come. His rule will be tested by disputes over land, by demands for increased trade, by the ever-looming shadow of European colonial ambitions. How he navigates these challenges will shape not just Benin's future, but the endurance of the sacred rites you witness today. And as you walk away, you carry a final thought. A ritual is enough to safeguard a kingdom's soul when history's currents grow ever stronger. Woodcarvers and the palace door guardians tonight. You find yourself at the edge of the palace compound just after dusk. When torchlight flickers against broad wooden gates carved in deep relief, the massive doors stand, silent sentinel over the palace entrance, so heavy they require 10 men to open them on ceremonial occasions. Tonight, however, they are closed, and you must wait until dawn to glimpse their painted surfaces. Instead, you settle on a low bench beside the gate's massive iron rings and lean against a smooth wooden pillar. Its surface is polished from centuries of hands passing by, smoothing away the grain until it gleams in reddish-brown dot as the sky deepens into velvet indigo. A soft tapping drifts from within the palace workshop, the sound of mallets and chisels shaping wood. You follow this muted rhythm along a narrow corridor lined with carved screens, each panel depicting scenes from Benin's founding myths, hunters pursuing leopards, ancestral heads guarded by ebony spirits, canoe voyages along silty rivers. Finally, the corridor opens into a long, lantern-lit hall hung with wooden beams. There a half-dozen carvers work side by side on palace doors destined to guard not only the main gate but inner chambers reserved for royal rituals. The carvers wear simple cotton tunics dyed deep indigo, cloths knotted at the waist. Their faces are calm, focused, eyes narrowed as they coax intricate designs from hefty planks of iroko wood. One man, an older artisan named Uafo, works on the door panel closest to the doorway. His hands move with measured precision, gouging out the image of a crowned figure standing beside a kneeling warrior. The figure's coral crown, carved in shallow relief, will later be painted with lacquer to catch torchlight. Beneath the carving lie channels for inlaid brass, now empty grooves awaiting molten metal. Next to you, Afo, a younger apprentice named F, balances a narrow mallet in one hand and a chisel in the other. He taps lightly against the wood, revealing the sinuous curves of a python weaving through creeping vines. Each twist of the reptile's body will eventually carry a line of brass strip, symbolizing the oba's flexible authority across land and water. You watch a thin curl of wood chip away, falling to the floor like pale confetti. At the far end of the hall, two brothers, twin craftsmen known collectively as the Ibos, work in tandem on the largest door panel you've ever seen. It stretches nearly 18 feet tall and depicts the mythical founder Aba's meeting with foreign traders. Their combined efforts produce a harmonious composition: ostrich feathers and leopard skins carved above, carved anklets and coral bracelets below, a small ivory tusk motif carved in the center. Between each motif, The brothers leave just enough negative space so that when the door is closed, flickering firelight will cast dancing shadows, bringing the scene to life. As you approach, you notice the smell of freshly cut wood, earthy, sweet, and almost resinous. Shavings gather in neat piles at each craftsman's feet, and the floorboards are streaked with sawdust. Lantern light pools on the richly grained surface, illuminating tiny knots and growth rings that hint at each plank's long life as a mighty tree. The wood itself, you learn, was felled last season in the Otpela forest under strict royal decree. Only mature Iroko trees marked with the OBA symbol may be cut, ensuring that the forest's balance remains unbroken. You sit cross-legged beside UFO. He pauses and hands you a sharpened chisel. "Try your hand," he says quietly. You accept with hesitation, placing the chisel's tip on a scrap block. He taps gently with a small hammer. The chisel sinks in, carving a shallow arc. You feel the wood's resistance, the brief catch as the fiber splits. You withdraw your hand, surprised at the intimate connection, how a simple groove links you to generations of craftsmen. UWAIFO nods. Each strike of the chisel is a prayer, he explains. A prayer for the Oba's peace, for the forest's harmony, for our people's safety. He gestures to the partially completed door. These doors protect more than walls. They guard our past and future. You glance around and notice small talismans tucked into low corners of each panel. Tiny carved heads of ancestral chiefs, bundles of dried herbs, strips of red cloth. These are the Ikarodo, the woodcarver's protective charms. Placed before carving begins, they ensure that spirits assist the work and prevent misfortune. If a craftsman forgets to renew his Ikarodo, a chisel slip can ruin an entire panel, an outcome believed to invite ancestral displeasure. As the carvers pause for a mid-evening meal of pounded yam and fiery pepper soup, you share their simple fare. They eat with wooden spoons, careful not to stain their hands before returning to carving. F mentions that carving such doors can take months, even years, depending on scale and detail. The biggest door took 3 summers to finish, he says, eyes bright with pride. We measured each inch by the OBA's coronation cycle. It must be done by the next festival. You ask about the festival, the Awaji, the Yam Feast one. The doors will finally be installed. UFO's gaze softens. That day, he says, the doors will swing open with drums and praise songs. The OBA will lead the procession through them, stepping from the old year into the new. He taps his chisel gently on the bench. Our work matters in that moment. One flawless hinge, one polished relief. It must welcome the Orba and ward off evil. You settle in as the carvers resume mallet against chisel, creating a gentle staccato. Outside, night creatures stir in the nearby gardens, and the palace walls hum with distant drums. Inside, the craftsmen shape wood into guardians destined to stand watch long after they are gone. Yet questions linger. You recall tensions at Story 8. Foreign traders' influence and absent chiefs. How might these carved doors, symbols of tradition, fare when contested factions wield modern rifles instead of coral spears? Will these wood-carved guardians remain potent emblems of divine order, or will they be stripped, plundered, or defaced? In upheaval for now, you rise and step back into the shadows of the hall. The carvers work on, chisels glinting in lantern glow. Each groove a small testament to artistry and faith in the Orba's enduring reign. At sunrise, you return to the workshop just as the first rays pierce through high-set windows. The carvers are already at their positions, benches dusted with sawdust. Today, UFO and F will begin inlaying brass strips into the python motif they carved last night. The process is meticulous. First, they heat a thin brass ribbon over a shallow clay brazier until it glows amber. Then press it into the carved groove using a small wooden burnisher. The metal holds its shape, filling the channel with a bright, reflective line that will catch torchlight at dusk. Watching this, you realize how Benin bronze casting and wood carving intertwine. The brass inlay is often made from melting down broken bronze plaques or repurposed casters, scrap. Nearby, the Igbo brothers carefully measure each ribbon length with ivory calipers, ensuring uniform width. A misplaced ribbon could warp when wet, leaving gaps that invite water damage and invite rot. Each ribbon, once set, is anchored by tiny wooden pegs driven into drilled holes along the channel's edge, a technique known as Yugo Igba, guardian feathers, believed to secure the spirit within the door. You accompany F outside to gather water from the palace well. Each bucketful is drawn with a carved wooden yoke across the shoulders, a design echoing the yoke carried by ancestral figures in the palace plaques. At the basin outside the workshop, apprentices wash finish-stained hands using clay basins engraved with fish scales. The rising steam mingles with sawdust, an earthy incense for the next carving stage. Surface smoothing. Back inside, the Igbo brothers begin applying a thin coat of red ochre mixed with palm oil to selected panels. Their long brushes from goat hair bound with cotton thread move in wide, circular strokes. The pigment seeps into wood pores, accentuating the grain's natural pattern. Once dry, the surface is buffed with soft linen cloth to reveal a warm glow. This glaze, known as iwillow skin of the house, protects the wood from termites and moisture while lending a softened sheen. Meanwhile, UFO's apprentice Igbenosa prepares the final relief details around the leopard spots. It holds a small V-shaped gouge at an angle to form sharp-edged indentations. These lines will later catch shadow, giving the spots a three-dimensional pop against the polished wood. Igbenosa's movements are practiced. He was chosen for his proportional sense and steady hand. His ikarodo, a tiny bundle of palm leaves tied with red cloth, dangles from his waist. He clucks his tongue in satisfaction as each spot emerges. Crisply outside, a royal envoy arrives bearing pleas from a minor chief whose door panel remains unfinished after months of delay. The envoy kneels, offering kola nuts in apology. UFO inspects the plea, then nods, gesturing for the envoy to return the next day with a ceremonial gift, a coral-adorned basket. Only then will carving resume on the chief's missing panel. You realize that even the pace of craftsmanship is governed by court politics. Missed deadlines carry social penalties as real as any misaligned ribbon. As afternoon heat rises, the carvers break for a meal of smoked fish, red palm paste, and thick maize porridge. They sit under a canopy of palm fronds outside the workshop, fans of woven grass in hand. Conversation drifts from technique to gossip, a rumor that Portuguese merchants are commissioning an ivory-carved door panel for their factory, a whispered fear that coastal chiefs will soon demand equal status in the palace hierarchy, speculation that the next OBA may replace wood with imported metal doors. F listens quietly, then says, "Our work carries the kingdom's memory. If those doors change, our traditions risk fading." His gaze drifts to the horizon, where the lagoon shimmers. Under the sun, UFO places a reassuring hand on his apprentice's shoulder. "Metal cannot hold our prayers," he replies. "Brass may gleam, but wood breathes with our ancestors." After the meal, carving resumes in earnest. You watch as each step, inlay, occlusion glaze, relief shaving builds upon the last. The door panels gradually transform from crude planks into guardian figures. By dusk, half the hall glows with polished surfaces, the brass veins shimmering in lantern light. Yet as you leave, you ponder the unspoken tensions. If coastal chiefs demand metal doors, will these wooden guardians be adrift on foreign seas, sold as curios, their spiritual potency lost? And if the arbor salt revenues dwindle due to new trade routes, will the palace workshop's resources shrink, forcing carvers to substitute cheaper woods or pigments? For now, the carvers labor on each strike of mallet, each burnish of brass, each stroke of ochre, an act of devotion and defiance. Their doors may one day guard a changed kingdom, but tonight they stand as testaments to Benin's enduring artistry and the delicate balance between tradition and transformation. Before the first drums of the New Yam Festival, the final door panel must be installed at the southern gate of the inner quarter portal, used only for sacred ceremonies. At dawn, you return with the Igbo brothers and UFO's team. The massive assembled doors rest on low wooden rollers, their carved surfaces sheathed in cloth until the unveiling moment. Chiefs and palace guards stand ready, each bearing long poles to guide the doors into bronze-lined grooves set in the gate's threshold as the sun rises. The choral chief arrives. Wearing an anklet of tinkling bells, he signals the drumbeat to begin, and the cloth coverings are pulled back. You gasp at the transformation. The doors now shimmer with interlaced patterns of polished brass and red ochre glazed wood. The python's winding body gleams. The leopard's spots leap with shadow and light. Ancestral faces peer from niches carved in high relief. Lanterns set around the gate catch morning light, sending moving reflections across the courtyard floor, dot with synchronized heaves. The carvers and palace craftsmen guide the doors along the grooves. The rollers click softly, and the doors slide into place with a measured thud. Chiefs step forward, touching each panel in succession, a gesture sealing the door's power as protectors of the sacred precinct. A hush falls, broken only by the distant crow of a rooster. The choral chief then presents a small bronze plaque, freshly cast, bearing the Orber's emblem, a crowned leopard flanked by twin fish. He presses it into a shallow recess carved at door's center, securing it with coral pegs. This final touch links bronze casting and wood carving traditions, affirming that both arts serve the Arbor's protection. Standing back, you'll survey the completed Gaetion orchestration of craftsmanship and ritual. The doors will swing open only for the Orber's procession during the Iwaji, when he leads his people from old harvest into the new year. In that moment, every carved line and brass inlay will be consecrated by footsteps, prayers, and the grinding of yams. As the courtyard fills with chiefs and palace musicians, you reflect on the carver's journey. Months of felling royal trees, chanting protective charms, inlaying brass soothed by fire, and glazing wood with ancestral pigments. Their work bridged art and faith, politics and ecology, private devotion and public spectacle. Yet you carry one lingering thought. In an age when foreign metals and new rulers press upon Benin's walls, will these wooden guardians endure their spiritual potency in the kingdom they once protected? Or will time, change, and outside influences transformed them into mere relics of a vanished era. Tonight, you step through the lesser eastern gate of the palace complex, entering an enclosed courtyard illuminated by low oil lamps. The air is warm and scented faintly with myrrh. Ahead, an unadorned doorway opens into a cool, dimly lit corridor, a realm reserved not for chiefs or nobles, but for those whose voices few outside these walls ever hear. The palace eunuch pause as two figures glide past, tall, slender men in knee-length tunics of muted indigo, their heads shaved smooth, faces composed in quiet dignity. Each wears a simple bronze anklet to mark his rank. They exchange soft greetings in Edo, voices hushed as the rustle of silk against stone. Beyond them lies the eunuch's quarters, a row of low chambers, where they sleep on reed mats and rise before dawn to prepare the palace for the Arba's day. You follow the nearest eunuch named Arba Kura through an unassuming door into the heart of palace. Administration, the privy hall. Here, carved wooden desks adorned with brass inkwells line the walls. Parchments, lists, grain stores, tribute deliveries, and guest schedules. Only eunuchs have access to this space, for they alone are trusted to oversee the Oba's private affairs. Oba Kura unmolds a clay lamp and sets it on a desk before gesturing for you to sit on a woven stool. He pours palm wine into a small cup and passes it to you. The wine's sweetness masks a bitter undertone, a reminder that those who serve closest to power often taste both its nectar and its poison. Across the hall, two younger eunuchs, twins named Idia and Igbenagages, study a ledger of tribute from coastal chiefs. They read aloud, 20 baskets of salted fish, 4 jars of palm oil, a crate of Portuguese glass beads. Their voices carry no enviably the disciplined tone of men accustomed to order and discretion. Abu Kur explains. We ensure that gifts and taxes reach the royal treasury and that no envoy bypasses proper channels. A misplaced tribute could spark offense or worse, suspicion of rebellion. He pauses, and you note the subtle gravity behind his words. The eunuch's role extends beyond ceremony into the realm of palace, security and political stability. A raised platform at the hall's center sits a small bronze gong. Arbakir strikes at one soft resonant hand. 3 more eunuchs enter. Bearing rolled mats, fresh garments, and a carved ebony chest, they assemble swiftly, their movements precise. Arbakir instructs them in low tones. Place the Oba's mourning mat beside the throne. Bring his coral robe. Ensure the chest's lid is secure for dispatch to the southern gate. You recognize these tasks as mundane yet essential. The eunuchs manage the Oba's daily movements, from the throne room to private audiences, safeguarding his person and preserving court protocol. Their authority transcends mere servitude. It is a form of invisible power. When preparations finish, Arbakir leads you behind a carved screen into a narrow antechamber. Here, feather fans hang in a row, each large plume tied to a slender, ebony handle, used to cool the Orba during midday audiences. He lifts one fan, brushes a plume with his fingers, and explains each fan bears a seal of rank, handed down through generations of service. Only we may touch them, only we may wield them. He closes his eyes briefly, as if recalling a memory. Once, he says, I saved a chamberlain from poisoning by tasting his food first. The poison was subtle castor seed crushed among yams. I felt the faint bitter sting and alerted the king's guard. That night, an uneasy peace returned to the palace. You realize how that danger entwines eunuchs in palace intrigue. Their exemption from standard male roles, husband, father, war leader, renders them both trusted and suspect. They stand outside kinship networks, yet hold vital keys to the Oba's safety. Oba Kura offers a small wooden box carved with leopards. Inside rests a handful of red coral beads, kept ready to bestow on scribes or envoys who accomplish delicate missions. Our gifts carry the Oba seal, he notes. We administer favor and discipline alike. A soft rhythm arises, distant drums signaling the Oba's morning audience in the throne hall. Obakyar nods. Time for our most visible duty. He motions you to follow as he strides through the privy hall into the grand courtyard there. The Oba's dais awaits beneath a canopy of fine coral beads. Chiefs bow in turn, presenting petitions. At each, Arbachir steps forward to present the coral-studded fan, an emblem of royal attention, before retreating silently. His presence shifts the mood. With fan in hand, he deflects sunlight and whispers reminders of protocol to junior attendants. As the audience proceeds, you sense the eunuch's layered influence, orchestrators of ritual, guardians of security, dispensers of honor, and agents of the Arba's will. Their quiet actions bind palace life together, ensuring that from dawn to dusk, each moment reflects the Arba's authority. Yet questions linger in your mind as the crowd disperses. In an era of shifting trade routes and growing foreign influence, will these eunuchs maintain their discreet power? Or will new forces, wealthy coastal merchants, Christian missionaries, or rival factions seek to supplant them as gatekeepers of Benin's ruler? For now, you stand beside Abuchir in the empty courtyard, the morning sun glinting off coral beads and brass inlays. He tucks the fan beneath his arm and nods, eyes steady. You realize the palace's hidden hierarchy depends on men like him, once erased from lineage. now inseparable from the kingdom's fate. The morning audience disperses in a ripple of color, beaded gowns, leopard skin mantles, polished ivory tusks pressed into hands for blessing. You follow Abakir as he retreats through a side corridor into the eunuch's private chambers. Here, the mood shifts from public spectacle to quiet strategy. A small group of senior eunuchs awaits around a low table carved from ebony, its surface inlaid with brass maps of the kingdom's provinces. Abakir takes his place at the table's head, signaling the others to draw near. He produces a rolled parchment, the latest report on grain shortages in Ida province, and it across the map. The chief eunuch, Ekpon, traces a finger along the river trade routes. If we divert surplus from the South Bank warehouses, we can avert famine until next yam harvest. Another eunuch, Osagi, nods but raises a cautious point. Transporting grain by canoe this time of year risks delayed shipments. The lagoon currents grow treacherous in the Harmattan winds. He taps the map where river and lagoon meet. We'll need extra guards and a hastily arranged choral tribute to the water spirits to ensure safe passage. Abakir listens, then folds his arms thoughtfully. Arrange the tribute. I will speak to the priest of Olakon tonight. Secure his blessing. He turns to you, as though briefing an envoy. We maintain the palace's lifeblood: grain, salt, trade. When those lines break, disorder follows. You realize how intimately eunuchs manage the kingdom's logistics. Beyond ceremonial duties, they function as administrators, crisis managers, and royal confidants. Even in non-violent realms of tribute ritual, they exercise power with effects as profound as any battlefield campaign. A summons arrives. The Obe requires their counsel on a thorny matter. They stand and file down a staircase carved from single iroko, each step polished by centuries of feet. You follow, crossing a marble courtyard to the inner throne hall. Inside, the Oba sits beneath his coral canopy, flanked by ivory-tusked pillars. Today's audience is small. 2 coastal merchant princes seeking permission to build a fortified trading house at the lagoon's edge. Their Portuguese glass beads and calico cloth lay in piles before the throne. Abakir kneels beside the Oba. In a low voice only the king can hear, he translates the merchant's proposal in Edo to expand their warehouses in exchange for steady tribute and military support against coastal raiders. The Obe strokes his beard. In public, a palace herald announces the Obe has heard your plea. He will consider your offer, mindful of the realm's security and the welfare of its people. But you see Abakir's calculating eyes. He knows that foreign trading posts can undermine palace authority by establishing rival power centers. After the merchants depart, Abakir turns to Ekpan and Osagi in a private alcove. Gather intelligence on these men's ties to coastal chiefs. If they wield undue influence, we must negotiate stricter terms or bar their entry. He pauses. We cannot allow Benin's sovereignty to slip through open gates. The eunuchs dispatch runners to the riverfront. Tasks communicated via sealed bamboo tubes bearing the eunuch's distinctive coral-stained seals. Within an hour, twilight finds you aboard a small canoe gliding toward the lagoon's mouth. Younger eunuchs, armed only with fishing nets and lanterns, scan the water for signs of unauthorized vessels. As the canoe nears the inlet, you spy 2 Portuguese-style dhows anchored beyond the breakers. Soft voices drift across the water without alerting crew aboard. The eunuchs shore their canoe on a sandbank and slip through mangroves to a concealed vantage point. You watch as the traders confer with the local chief. Beneath a palm-thatched pavilion, maps of waterways spread on a low table. Before boarding, Abakir and Ekpan quietly observe from shadows. They note the chief's coral waist beads, tokens perhaps gifted recently, and the dhow's sleek hulls marked with unfamiliar flags. Back at the palace, they relay findings to Abakir, who records them in a volume bound in reptile hide. He adds a notation in coral ink. Monitor coastal overture. Prepare for eventual renegotiation. His hand moves with precision, each stroke deliberate. Across the following days, the eunuchs balance multiple roles, overseeing grain ship, coordinating rituals to appease river spirits, and clandestinely observing foreign envoys. At dawn and dusk they slip among courtiers in coral beads and indigo cloth, veiling their authority behind stoic faces. In council they speak rarely but decisively. You see Abakir convene another meeting, this time with palace goldsmiths. He examines small bars of brass and ivory tusks weighing tribute from inland villages. He inspects each piece for weight, fineness, and maker's mark. A substandard brass ingot sparks his raised eyebrow. He tasks the smiths to remelt and purify it before it enters the royal treasury. Later he visits the palace apothecary, where dried roots and powders line earthen jars. The chief herbalist shows him a sample of a new fever remedy made from plantain, leaves, and bitter cola. Abakir tastes the decoction of bitter temps that quickens the throat. He orders more leaves from nearby gardens, ensuring the remedy's supply for court officials during festival season. Done all these tasks: food, trade, ritual, medicine. The eunuchs operate as the palace's circulatory system, moving vital resources and information. Their eunuch status, once imposed by palace decree, has become their greatest asset, allowing access to inner sanctums off limits to others. As night falls on the seventh day, a sudden commotion alarms the palace. A coastal chief, affronted by a eunuch's refusal to deliver a disputed tribute, has led armed retainers to the southern gate. Drums beat a war cadence. Torches flare against the walls. Abakir springs into action. Gathering a detachment of palace guards, he dispatches twin eunuchs to the northern gate to secure retreat routes, then strides to the southern gate with Ekpan at his side. There he meets the enraged chief and speaks firmly, reminding him of the Aba's ultimate authority. The chief raises his spear. The crowd whitens at the prospect of violence, but Abakir unflinching orders his guards to lower arms. He gestures to the chief's coral waist beads and offers a handful of kola nuts. In soft Edo, he says, "Our quarrel is with tribute's weight, not your loyalty. Let us discuss within the palace halls." The chief hesitates, swayed by the eunuch's calm authority. Slowly he lowers the spear. Behind him, retainers relax their grips. The drums cease. Torches flicker lower. You realize how the eunuch's tempered presence and intimate command of court protocol diffuse potential rebellion. His position, neither noble nor commoner, allows him to stand as neutral arbiter, invoking the Oba's will without personal ambition. As the palace retakes order, you reflect on the eunuch's singular power. They stand at the crossroads of political, economic, and spiritual life, wielding influence through service and restraint. Their privilege, born of bodily sacrifice and social liminality, has become a cornerstone of Benin's stability. Yet, as you retire to the eunuch's quarters that night, you ponder the wider currents. Trade expanding, foreign powers probing, coastal alliances shifting. Will the eunuch's delicate balancing act endure when new loyalties emerge, and when influences beyond palace walls grow stronger? For now, their steady hands guide the kingdom through each crisis. But in an age of change, can any intermediary remain indispensably and unchallenged? At dawn on the eighth day, the palace gates stand calm once more. Under the lingering haze of sunrise, Abakir convenes the senior eunuchs in their privy hall. The coastal chief, petitioning for tribute adjustment, stands at the foot of the ebony map table, escorted by 2 palace guards. The air is heavy, with the scent of palm wine and smoldering incense. Abakir rises and motions the chief forward. In measured Edo, he outlines a compromise. The chief may retain half his disputed tribute this season, provided he supplies an extra canoe crew to convey surplus grain from Ida province. The chief nods, relief in his eyes, and clasps the Abakir's forearm in gratitude and honor. No courtier receives, with the agreement sealed by coral beads and palm wine. The eunuchs once again demonstrate their unique power, the ability to negotiate loyalty and resources directly with the kingdom's lesser rulers. The arrangement safeguards the palace's food stores, cements coastal loyalty, and averts armed conflict, an outcome that no army nor council of nobles could have ensured so quietly. Later that morning, you accompany Abukir to the royal treasury and annexed chamber behind the throne hall. The door, carved with intertwined serpents, swings open to reveal shelves stacked with labeled brass ingots, coral beads, ivory tusks, and jars of medicinal powders. Eunuchs stand behind low counters, verifying weight and purity with smith's scales and ivory calipers. Abukir inspects the newly remelted brass ingots from a northern village. He tests each bar's malleability by lightly tapping it with a small hammer, listening for a clear, ringing tone. Satisfied, he authorizes their transfer to the caster's workshop for plaque production. He then turns to a sealed jar of dried plantain leaf powder, a remedy he sourced from the palace apothecary. He sprinkles a pinch into his palm and inhales its faint herbal aroma. The Aba's court will rise with more vigor today, he muses quietly. In the afternoon, Abakir escorts the Aba to a private audience with a visiting Portuguese dignitary. As they pass through the grand courtyard, you note the respectful bows of courtiers and the whispering awe at Abakir's proximity to the king. In the antechamber, he arranges seats and coral pillows, ensures that the Aba's ceremonial fan, it stands ready, and verifies that no unauthorized attendants remain. Only then does he step back, letting the Aba and the foreigner converse. You stand just outside the carved ivory doors, overhearing snippets of their exchange, discussions of pepper and musk exports, the possibility of new maritime routes, questions about palace ceremonies. Occasionally, the Abakir slips inside to translate a phrase or to place a discreet coral bead upon a map, subtly indicating the Aba's favored coastline. His interventions are quiet, nearly invisible to all but the most attentive. When the audience concludes, the foreign dignitary withdraws with gifts of glass beads and fine cloth, praising the impeccable order of the court. Abakir bows, then turns to you. "These tokens seal our friendship," he says, "but they also require new oversight." He orders a fresh inventory of imported beads and a recalibration of tribute. Expectations further duties that only eunuchs oversee. As evening falls, you return to the eunuch's quarters to find Abakir and his fellow eunuchs gathered around the small brazier in a low-ceilinged chamber. They remove their indigo tunics, revealing simple linen shifts beneath. Bowls of maize porridge and smoked fish are offered. The mood, though informal, carries an undercurrent of solemnity. Abukir addresses the group. Today we navigated famine, diffused rebellion, negotiated foreign treaties, and safeguarded the Orba. Our tasks span from well to throne to lagoon. He raises his cup of palm wine. The eunuchs echo his gesture to service and to bin. The clink of cups resonates like a gong dot as each eunuch drinks. You consider their unique existence. They have no heirs of their own, their bodies rendered beyond marriage and children, yet their lineage continues through service, memory, and the coral beads they pass from hand to hand. Their power born from bodily sacrifice has become indispensable. You lie awake that night on your reed mat, recalling the weeks spent among the eunuchs, tasting grain, tracking tribute routes, observing private negotiations, and witnessing the careful choreography of palace rituals. Their influence, subtle yet pervasive, has shaped the kingdom's destiny as surely as any sword or spear. Before sleep overtakes you, one thought lingers in a world increasingly bound by foreign trade, evolving fates and shifting alliances. Can an institution built upon eunuch service endure? Will new voices, merchant councils, missionary emissaries, coastal potentates demand a seat at the privy hall's ebony table? Or will the eunuch's blend of loyalty, discretion, and administrative acumen secure their place as Benin's unseen stewards for generations to come? As dawn approaches, you drift into dreams of coral-canopied thrones, brass-lined corridors, and the quiet guardians who stand at the heart of power, men without families of their own, yet fathers of the palaces. Order and continuity.